Hey everybody, welcome to We've Got Ward, a Doof Media podcast series where we expertly dissect and discuss Ward, Wildbow's return to the world of parahumans. My name is Matt Freeman, and this is the one where Parian's power is revealed.
That's it? That's the intro?
Her power, it's in this one. Finally.
We're not going to do like a joke or...
Skin, makes sense, right? Remember when Leviathan immediately targeted her when she was starting to use leather in her dolls? It was right there all along.
This is the weekly podcast where Matt and I eagerly dive into Wildbow's world of skin, hair, and alien-based death powers as we analyze and interpret this ongoing web serial. This week on the show, all that radiation is starting to really do some damage as we explore the nuclear reactor that is chapters 18.6 and 18.7. The heroes continue to fight against the Titans, desperately trying to prevent connections. When all seems lost and the heroes retreat in exhaustion, Tattletale asks for one more push. One more skin-powered push. Then, Victoria takes a quick dip into Shardland, which surely will have no permanent consequences whatsoever, and then lays the proverbial smackdown on Shortcut, plays with some puppies, and has a nice chat with her uncle. Then her hair starts to fall out. Consequences, schmonsequences. Matt, what do you think of these two chapters?
I mean, things are fucking crazy, right? I mean, we've got just sort of putting the pressure on Victoria to the point where she's melting down and has us wondering things like, is this actually Victoria even anymore? There's been a lot of discussing about what exactly is going on with Victoria in these chapters, particularly this last one.
I think the text is inviting you to start asking those questions because it's kind of crazy, right?
Yeah.
What's going on with Victoria? Like, these chapters, we finish up the fighting, and then we have this, and we have this second 18.7, which is this very, very strange chapter. It's a chapter that I think we're going to talk about as we get through it, but it's a chapter that very closely mirrors a lot of the structural beats of the very first arc of this book. The ways in which the movement through this chapter in particular is very close to what Victoria went through. Like, and we'll hit those as we go. And that's interesting. Like, because like I noticed that, and then I was like, huh, interesting. But why? Why?
Yeah. Hopefully we can figure something out. But there's definitely a lot of really bizarre stuff happening in that chapter, and we're going to talk for a while about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Before we move on into these chapters, though, we do have an announcement. So Doof partner Do the Right Thing podcast, the Writing Prompt podcast, is hosting a Doof the Right Thing writing contest. And basically the rules are going to be listed in a link that you can probably find somewhere on the page that you're on. But basically, you take 1/4 worth of Do the Right Thing story prompts, and you can use the words from somewhere in that quarter to write a story for this contest. And there's prize money. And I did not do a good job describing the contest right then, but it's not that complicated. Just go look at the thing if you're interested in participating in a writing contest.
Yes, the thing.
Surely you can do a better job writing than I just did talking. So that should give you
not like it's your job or anything.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, I mean, this is a really fun idea that both you and Matthias from Do the Right Thing had. I love this. Like, we've always really enjoyed the contests we've done, but we've only ever done like drawing based art contests and not writing, which is kind of ironic because we love writing so much.
Right.
And so this was a really great way to honor some writers out there that are in our community. And I love these contests. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. Like Matt said, check out the link in the show notes or on the website or wherever you want. All the details will be there. If you're confused about anything, there's an email in that in those rules, and you can send a question. And,
there you go.
They'll answer it.
Yeah, and next week I'll have written out like a better thing to say here instead of just what I just said.
Yeah, because I don't even know when it's due, honestly. When's the contest?
It ends. Moving on into the chapters. That's all on the page. Okay, I wrote it down so I wouldn't have to remember it.
Of course.
All right, chapter 18.6. And we begin this chapter with this amazing vignette of Flower of the Hecatomb fighting valiantly to protect the artillery line of capes, only to make a misstep by moving to protect one group that didn't need protecting, leaving exposed the other flank, which is then pulverized by Oberon. Ultimately, the mistake was made because of a combination of exhaustion and inability to communicate with Ex Nihilo, the tinker who was handling the other flank. So basically, themes.
Yeah, you hinted at this in our conversation last week, right? How one of the things we're seeing amongst the capes in this battle is a breakdown of communications. And I think through exhaustion, but it's just also like the natural limits of the way we communicate, which I think is very different from the ways in which the Titans are seeming to communicate with each other, right? They have these connections and they are able to communicate and organize almost just like thinking. Humans, we have these pesky mouths and words, and those kind of suck sometimes. And like this is a great example of that at the opening of this chapter. How that lack of communication, how that breakdown in communication. I think both of these two people are like from different dimensions and don't even speak the same languages.
Right. I thought that felt very important. Right. This idea that we've met maybe 0 to very few of these characters from other dimensions. Presumably there are more than just 2 that Kefri picked up and didn't send back. And the fact that we're meeting 2 of them here and they were both put on the two ends of the flank, it's like this metaphor for we're trying to cover our bases, but our fundamental flaw, our fundamental error is an inability to be on the same page, our inability to communicate, and these miscommunications even between these really well-meaning people are fatal. Yeah,
and it all adds up to this feeling of how can we win? How can we win this thing when just one little breakdown of communication here, just like a half a second, she just one person not in a place where they thought they were going to help, but actually they should have been another place, and then 20 people dead. It's so tragic, and I love the way the text reinforces the horror of this moment, because like Victoria's talking about how the group has been getting help from Gunnery Ann, and then switches to had been getting help from Gunnery Ann, had added range to all abilities, had translated, had offered a constant barrage. Oberon hadn't even had to turn his head to look, and it's this moment of just almost indifference from the thing you're fighting against, leading to this horribly tragic event. And the repetition of the word had, the repetition of that past tense, like we read that line before we actually see what happened. Like it does that first, and then we see what Oberon actually did. And I just think that's powerful. Like that just reinforces and emphasizes the moment, the tragedy of the moment.
It's such a like defeatist way of phrasing it. Like it really ties into this moment later on today where Victoria's basically almost completely giving into this idea that this is the new status quo, which is something where prior to this point she's always been like, no, fuck that, no, not going to accept that, and just this kind of like litany of, yep, we lost that, it was a mistake, I agree, the repetition of had, it's so like it's going to be something terrible, right? Before she even says over and crush all these people, you're like, oh no.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really cool.
Yeah, I love that, and I love what you said about how it reflects Victoria in some ways giving up, because that's literally what we see. Like last week we had that moment where Tattletale told her the reality of the situation, and even then she was still like no, and we see throughout this chapter her get to a place of, she says maybe this is the status quo now. She admits that to herself. And it's powerful.
Yeah. So one thing that I think that we're going to be tracking over the course of these two chapters will be Victoria sort of coming apart internally. And I mean that in both the colloquial sense of the word, like she's losing hope, she's freaking out, she's past her breaking point, and in the literal sense of like splitting, like she's contradicting, she's contradicting herself. Like in this moment, in response to Flower of the Hecatomb's mistake, she both wants to give Hecatomb a hug and to scream at her, which I think is maybe kind of how Victoria feels toward herself right now too.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And it's almost as if she's two minds about everything, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And I agree that this is a trend that we see throughout this chapter, and I think it kind of carries over into the next chapter a little bit. But yeah, this moment of I'm feeling both these things simultaneously, and that, of course, people do that all the time, right? Like I was kind of being facetious when I was like, oh, it definitely means there's both sides of them. I think people have contradictory feelings all the time. But the part of this that I think is unique is that she's unable to, or just doesn't have time to actually process what that means. Like she says here, I didn't make a call on exactly what to feel because I had shit to do. With no resolution made, that feeling sat heavy on my chest. Like all I had was the common element between the two contradictory impulses. So like, not only do you have these contradictory feelings that pop into your head, but you can't even process them. You can't even decide which one is the way I actually feel, which is kind of a funny way to process emotions, because I don't think we actually do that, right? I don't think we actually, like, if I have two contradictory thoughts that pop into my head, my body consciously goes, but it's this one.
Right.
That just kind of happens normally.
I mean, yeah, well, I think often what happens is we feel sensations and then we put a label on those. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, one of the most powerful tricks I ever learned for public speaking was to reconceptualize nervousness as excitement. It's like, yeah, it feels pretty much the same, right?
Sure.
But you totally change your attitude toward it by changing the label you put on it.
Yeah.
Which I think you can do for a lot of stuff. But yeah, just to kind of like say out loud, I think what you were hinting at, there's a suggestion that a lot of the stuff that she's thinking in these chapters is actually wastes thoughts leaking in. That's one idea, right? That's one possibility. Yeah. And that could literally be what's happening. And I think, as we've said before, the fun thing about genre fiction is that could be what's happening, but that also serves perfectly well as a metaphor for what happens when you're put under extraordinary amounts of stress. You are sort of in that place where you're going to have internally contradictory reactions, and you're going to have to move on before you can even parse what they mean.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, I think it would be a mistake to start looking at individual lines and saying, that's waste, that's Victoria, that's waste, that's Victoria. I think one of the things the book has tried to reinforce over and over and over again, especially through Tattletale, is you can't parse this out like that. You have to look at it holistically. It's not that's waste and that's Victoria, that's waste Victoria, that's waste Victoria. Like, if there is a melding happening here, it is happening on a level at which the thoughts are becoming indistinguishable from each other.
Yeah.
And that's interesting.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot more sense, right? You can say something doesn't sound like Victoria, but that doesn't mean that you're saying, therefore, it's waste injecting this thought into your head.
Sure. It's a change. Like, it's still a change in character, but not to that extent. Yeah.
Yeah. So Damsel and Foil tag team Oberon, somehow both basically flying around using a combination of boosts from Victoria, slingshots from Sveta, and dancing on missiles. Solar Stare is using her solar blast to blast Oberon, which annoys Victoria because Solar Stare's power has side effects on anybody nearby, which she doesn't like. Gundeck, a new fan favorite, pounds Titan Scotty with military-inspired tinker weapons. A lot of this chapter is basically just Parahumans Unleashed, where we just see the full destructive capabilities of all these heavy hitters.
Yeah, but it's just anime. I can close my eyes and just think of it as one of those good animes, not the bad ones, those good ones.
Sure. I know what you're talking about.
But I do think it is important what you said, that we see a ticked off Victoria here again. I just forgot. Solar Stare is just annoying Victoria through her use of power. And I think is it Solar Stare, or is it one of the other capes where she's like, if she didn't have someone else around her on her team, I would be like, get the fuck out of here. Like, if there wasn't someone else vouching for her, I would have been like, you need to just leave.
I think
I'm not
basically,
sure if it's Solar Stare. I can't remember.
Well, I think what she said about Solar Stare was like, I would have told her to fuck off, except the wardens seemed to think that she was contributing or something like that.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's interesting because like almost nobody really seems to be able to do much meaningful damage. And Solar Stare does have this very impressive beam attack. It's just that it also kind of like blinds everyone afterwards. So
yeah, I mean, and part of that is we're seeing once again that lack of communication, right? That like in a perfect world where every one of these heroes is in sync with each other, that stops being a drawback to the power because we know it's coming, we can react to it, we can plan around it, we can strategize around it, but that's not what's happening right now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I do have this one moment, and I want to talk to you about this because I really like it. There's this moment where as Victoria is carting around Foil, she looks down and sees that place where Oberon just wiped out all those capes and basically says, if I hadn't run out of ammo, or I ran out of ammo, so if you hadn't picked me up, if you hadn't given me another weapon, if you hadn't taken me here, I would have been down there. I would have been killed. I'd be dead. And this is a really important, fascinating moment, and I think it kind of ties into our discussion question from last week around how does Wildbow set the stakes in his battle? This battle is so intense. There are thousands of things happening at once, but the fact that we take the time out of this, it's not just jumping across missiles. That's not all we see Foil doing. It's not just cool, badass moments of action. We take the time amidst the scope of this action to have this tiny beat of character moment, this tiny beat where we let a character look at death and say, that could have been me. And just deal with that. Just sit with that for a minute. It doesn't go anywhere really. Like it goes somewhere long term over the arc of this character, but it doesn't move the plot forward in any kind of specific way. It's just a moment of where we just let this beat play out. And I think it's so important and adds to the way these battles feel that these moments are allowed to play out. We're allowed to feel the emotion of that. We're not just going from giant set piece to missile jump to giant guns. We have these quieter beats in between each and every one of those.
Yeah, right. If you took out stuff like this and like Victoria's interaction with pitch hitter later, switch hitter, sorry, it becomes much less, right? It becomes much lesser than it is.
And it wouldn't change the outcome of the story. It wouldn't change the direction of the plot at all. But it would change the feeling of it, the tone of it, the emotion of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, again, Wildbow's doing multiple things at once here because not only is this a very effective moment in and of itself, but it is kind of rooting us in Foil for a second so that we find it, she's kind of fresh in our mind. She's kind of in our RAM rather than our hard disk, so that when actual plot stuff happens involving her in a little bit, we're kind of primed for that. And I think that's something that Wildbow very often does, where if Gru was going to suddenly show up in this battle, we would have heard from Imp many times prior to that point, right? He would have he would have rooted us in that character so that we would be ready to feel what she was feeling in that moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean, because a lot of this chapter is in essence building up to the moment of Perion's true power.
Yeah.
So every interaction with Foil is another link on that chain. I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So we also learn a bit about Team, Teem, a guy with a very checkered past who creates a shitload of little shitty master minions, and Victoria does not like him.
Yeah, we kind of have a little mini arc with this guy, right? We paint him at the start as this... Victoria describes him as a jackass cape.
Yeah.
He's reluctant to commit to anything. He in the past has tried out both hero and villain. And we see that kind of reluctance reflected in how he's fighting here. He's circling around. He's looking for opportunities, not really diving right into the thick of things. There's a definite feeling of, I don't like this guy. I think she decides I'll keep him alive. After weighing the options of like, yeah, jackass, but I'll keep him alive. And by the end of this chapter, I think, at least my opinion on him has dramatically changed. We don't really get to see if Victoria is, but he's definitely not that type of person we see by the end of this chapter.
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing you can say about Victoria, whether you agree with her or not, is that she is prone to these snap judgments based on kind of classifying people. Yeah. Like just the idea of classifying him as like, oh yeah, this is his backstory. He's one of these jackass capes. She kind of puts people in a box. And then it's kind of hard for her to update that box. Yeah. Although not impossible.
Not impossible.
There's been plenty of instances where she has. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, this is one instance where this dude got put in a box pretty quickly. I wonder if we're supposed to feel like Victoria has also kind of softened up on him, because she's the one who notices for us that he was still on the battlefield.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we are from her perspective, so she did notice it. We don't see a specific moment of, oh, hey, maybe he's not quite such a jackass.
True. Yeah, that's true. So Victoria checks in on the team and sees that Tristan has been keeping damaged buildings shored up, and Rain has been doing first aid because his powers are still knocked out. And of course, Sveta's been swinging around helping Damsel, basically.
Yeah, and I like that we take the time to check in on each one of these people. It's so weird to me. I mean, it makes perfect logical sense that every one of these people has a different role in this fight, so they're really not going to be like hanging out together. But I just remember after the loneliness of being apart from her team all last arc, that she's out on the field with her team now, but not actually with them, you know?
Yeah, like no one is really working together, you know?
Yeah.
No, Kenzie's elsewhere. You don't get the sense that they're fighting as a team at all. She's just doing this brawler, take the fight to the enemy thing. And
yeah.
There's really no teamwork. Okay, that's not true, because eventually she starts flying around and rescuing people. But when she's on the offense, it seems like she's just attacking.
Yeah.
So yeah, one setup that we don't see paid off in this particular pair of chapters is the message from Kenzie telling Victoria that Dragon wants help.
Yeah, it does not pay off in these chapters, but that beat is hit enough times where you start to think, oh, so this is something important. We get one beat here, we get two beats of this in the next chapter, and you're starting to kind of come to terms like this help, what she needs, what Dragon needs from Victoria is something significant, obviously.
Right, and it's really interesting because I was thinking about it and I was like, what help could Victoria be to Dragon? Like because Kenzie says something about like calibrations and tolerances or something. I didn't write it down, but I'm like, why?
Right.
And almost I almost wonder if that's not even true, and she really just wants her for some other reason that she can't talk about. It's really kind of a mystery that's been nagging at me. I really can't wait to figure out what that is.
I mean, Victoria suspects it's Kenzie related, but we don't really have any evidence to support that outside the fact that Kenzie and Dragon have been known to hang out together.
Yeah, true.
I mean, in my opinion, like anytime it's like, what do I need Victoria for specifically? It's going to do a Shard World, because that is the one area of expertise that Victoria definitely, absolutely 100% has over most of the other people especially in the Warden's organization. I mean, that's why they asked her to be the one to give the overview of the area. So that's what my head jumped to, but I don't know what specifically.
I agree that it's probably something that more to do with information than it is to do with like powers or whatever. Mm-hmm. So next we get another beat of Perion working herself up. So first, in the background almost, we saw that she was using leather puppets, and Foyle says leather is her best material, which...
What's leather made out of?
What is leather made of? Yeah. And then now she's using costumes stripped from the dead as a source of cloth, which is kind of another line being crossed, right?
Yeah. And so, full disclosure, by the time I got to the point where I was reading this chapter, I was aware already going into it that this would be the Perion's Power is Revealed chapter, which we will talk about more later. But because of that, both of the times I read this, I was paying very close attention to what Wildbow is doing to kind of build to that moment. It's a big moment within the story. It's a big moment external to the story, and it needs the proper build. And I think we kind of touched on this already, but I think the story is doing a really nice thing here, like where we're watching Perion kind of get pushed further and further and further. She runs out of regular materials. She switches to leather. She's running out of leather. She's stripping clothes from the dead to use them. And it's just we're pushing. If there's a line in the sand, we're just she's slowly getting dragged closer and closer to that line by the Titans. And even if you didn't know that this was going to pay off by the end of the chapter, I think you would feel that pull. The text makes it clear enough that you feel that pull to something. And I was wondering, I mean, you probably read it before we knew that. Did you have that reaction? Did you have that feeling that before it was revealed that she was being pulled to something, regardless of what it ended up being?
Well, so my particular place with respect to this reveal was that beloved community artist Cyrix had told me the true power months and months and months ago.
What?
And they'd asked me not to tell anyone else. That was kind of part of the deal. Because
you didn't even tell me. You didn't even tell me.
I think I may have, and then and see, my recollection was that I told you, and you were just like, whatever. I don't want to know. I want to find out in the course of the story.
And then, I literally don't remember.
And then you forgot about this apparently, which is which is pretty hilarious. But yeah, so I knew that, and in fact, when the leather thing was brought up, I knew that it was going to happen in this chapter because one of the main pieces of evidence for knowing that her power is skin was that the one time we see her use leather in Worm is when she's fighting Leviathan. She uses leather in her creations, and then Leviathan immediately attacks her. Well, one of the things that happens is like she uses a leather doll, and like the concrete sidewalk crushes and shatters under the foot of her puppet, and that's unusual. That never happens. It's like basically implying like, oh, this is a much stronger puppet than usual. And so that to me, I've always been primed on leather with Parian. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, it's going to happen in this chapter. So I was reading it in that particular light.
Should we? This is a weird thing where like most of the people probably listening to this the day it's going to come out are aware of these kind of things, but maybe we should pretend that a person 10 years from now is listening to this and might not be aware of the conversations in the community.
Sure. The idea that what Parian's true power has been a massive community mystery and meme for years at this point. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that right there. People might not know that. So I think that's important. And we're kind of jumping the gun a little bit, but that's fine. We do that all the time. I think the reason this works is because it's not just like a cheap, hey, look, community, you finally know now, ha ha ha. It matters within the story too, and I think that's one of the things that these books do really well is when it's some big, powerful, like meta question answered moment. It always has dramatic stakes within the episode, within the story itself.
Right.
Like this matters because it's a reflection of Parian's journey as a human being and the things that she's been, the person she's been trying to be and the person she ends up continually being pushed into, and how that relates to her relationship with Foyle. That is very human. It is very personal. It is very relationship based. That is what it is at its core. The rest of this is cool for the community to deal with. And that's kind of why when I think of something like The Sleeper, which is one of our other big unanswered questions, that's why I'm much more indifferent to that, because I can't see a way to easily connect that back to the human element to where I suddenly care about who the Sleeper is, where I cared about this reveal because it says something about Parian and Foyle and their relationship. And look, the Sleeper could come in and be awesome and be personal and have stakes and tie into everything perfectly. At this point, I'm willing to believe that Wildbow can do just about anything he wants with any of these characters and make it work. So I'm not saying that's impossible, but I think that is a much further stretch than this. And that's why I thought this was fantastic.
Sure. I mean, just imagine how like hollow this would have felt if it was just like, and then there was a fucking badass moment where Perrin used the skin doll and it was awesome. Like, it's not supposed to feel awesome. I mean, no. It kind of feels awesome, but it also feels miserable because Perrin's like crying as she does this, and Foyle's horrified, and it's just sad. It's just this sad, tragic, and brutal moment, basically. And yeah, the silver lining is she gets a badass puppet that can wrestle a Titan to the ground. But a lot of mixed feelings, right? It's horror awesome. It's classic horror awesome.
I agree.
So, but we're not quite there yet, though.
No,
so
we jumped ahead a little bit.
We are going to get back to that, though. So Victoria tries to give some support to Switch Hitter, who is lonely and freaked out, much like Victoria is. Switch Hitter is a Simpsons fan, and thus my new favorite character.
Okay, but is that really... Like, I agree with you. It's so close to the Simpsons reference. But is it...
I mean, it did force me to go on a tangent about whether, like, people from Earth Bet watched The Simpsons, or like whether The Simpsons would have been different, or did they get episodes of The Simpsons from Aleph? It was like I'm not joke. This is not a joke. This is not a bit. I actually was distracted for a minute thinking about the implications of a character saying a Simpsons quote, and then I got over it.
This is such a classic Matt thing.
For the record, I love The Simpsons. So
we both love The Simpsons.
Yes,
and I love, like, I used this scene as my opening GIF on one of my radiation live read chapters from earlier in the thing, because I was like, whenever I think of radiation, I think of Radioactive Man.
Absolutely.
And whenever I think of Radioactive Man, I think of my eyes, the goggles, they do nothing.
Yes, it's so good. But yeah, Switch Hitter, she's been fighting like hell, and she also seems to be in denial that her whole team probably just got squashed.
Yeah, wow, this Switch Hitter, one of my favorite characters. Like, it is amazing how quickly this book can make you absolutely fall in love with the character that you just met. She's exhausted. She's so disheartened. She's so scared. And yet Victoria's like, come on, I'm going to get you out of here. And she's like, well, who would replace me? Well, nobody. I was like, no, I can't leave. Yeah. And like, it's just, you are immediately endeared to this person who is basically having a breakdown. Like, they are breaking down in front of our eyes. And I love her so much.
Yeah, and of course, worth pointing out that her rhetoric she's using is like exactly what Victoria would say. She's who's going to replace me? Then no, I can't leave.
Yeah.
So here we have what I think is a very interesting moment as Victoria is mostly experiencing like anger, impatience, and frustration with this poor woman. And I think this in itself tells us how poorly Victoria's doing. She eventually shakes it off, and she actually wonders what came over her. She actually literally wonders in the text if the gas somehow had this effect on her and made her behave this way.
Yeah.
But then a bit later, she acknowledges that she's just exhausted and hopeless, and that's all her. It's just that she's kind of emotionally all over the place right now. So, you know, just kind of describing her kind of ongoing breakdown and dissociation. After she picks Hitter up, she thinks that she can barely feel her own breathing, and then later she messes up Hitter's preferred name, which is really out of character for Victoria.
Yeah, I mean, another instance of Victoria messing up names, and we even know from a couple chapters ago where she says, I pride myself on my ability to get those right, and she calls her Switch. She says, I'd prefer Hitter. She says, okay, and then she calls her Switch again later.
Yeah.
I this is another instance of Victoria kind of being divided in half about something, right?
Yeah.
This anger and frustration in the middle of giving her a hug. And I think it's especially effective at this point because we've spent so much time establishing Switch Hitter. Like, we spent this time to establish her as this person who's exhausted, like falling apart, losing it, and yet is still staying out here, is still fighting, is still swinging that bat exhaustedly. And then we have this moment of Victoria's like mad at her, and it's so off-putting, right? It's such a, like, we've just, the book has just endeared us to this character, and then we see our protagonist go like, oh, I'm so mad at them. Yeah. And you're just like, what? Like that contrast like kind of throws you back a little bit. And I think it's kind of designed that way. And I think a reflection of that is how surprised Victoria is of it as well. Like, it's not just us. Victoria, like, she describes it as finding a strange and angry dog in the same room as me when it suddenly snarled, right? Like, which is an interesting way of kind of externalizing the anger. Like, it's almost as if she doesn't even see it coming from her. It's just something else that's in her. And suddenly sparks up, and she's like, whoa.
Yeah, and it is tempting to lay this at the feet of waste, but I mean, it could be partly waste, probably is partly waste, everything's partly waste, but I really think this is mostly, in my opinion, just mostly exhaustion and just this incredible level of frustration.
Yeah, I
that
agree.
like we're relying on you. We need you to be here, and you're falling apart, and this is frustrating. And it's also frustrating to Victoria that she herself is falling apart. Like she's just angry and frustrated at everything, and she's even aware that her emotions are kind of childish in this moment. Like she compares them at some point. I forget if this was last week to like having a tantrum and breaking her own toys.
I think
Like
it's later in these chapters, actually.
Is it? Yeah. I lost track, but yeah, it's like you said, it's off-putting, but then like because you want to give Switch Hitter a hug.
Yeah.
And so it's really off-putting when Victoria reacts that way. But then, of course, Victoria comes around and she does give her a hug, and then you're like, okay, there's our Victoria. But
Right.
man, she the fact that she had that moment there is telling.
Yeah, I agree. And man, I just like it's really, really, really powerful. I think I really loved. I love that. I love the idea of that it's such a powerful emotion that feels so foreign that her first reaction is, could this be the gas? Is the gas affecting me some way? Like that, I think really goes far to sell how shocked she is at feeling this way.
Yeah, I agree.
That she's looking for an external reason. Is this coming from inside me? How is that possible? And I love that, like, of course, what we're kind of subtly doing here is this is tying back to Glory Girl level frustration from Victoria's past, right? This feeling that we're not making any progress, we're not winning. We go out there, we get hurt to do what? To fix what? Are we making the world better? Are we doing anything? And now this is kind of thrown in front of Victoria in a much greater scaled way. And I think that is the core of what sends her spiraling, maybe like we've never seen before at the end of these two chapters.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Her problem back when she was Glory Girl was she would be, overly violent, overly aggressive, and impatient basically with everything, including herself, and that's what we're seeing here. So I think it's more evidence in that ledger. And
that I think that came from that impatience, that quick to anger, that over violent tendency came from a place of frustration at the inability to win, at the inability to succeed, at the inability to make a difference. And that's exactly what's happening here. They are not winning. In fact, they are, as we'll see later, they are fighting for a draw.
Yeah. And they're losing tons of people for that draw. Yeah. So here we begin to have something that I think is more or less setting up a semi 3-beat over the course of these two chapters. Where Victoria tells us right out, the standard method for handling a panic attack was to ground the person. But there was no fucking ground, so to speak. There were holes in reality. There was no air, nothing in the environment I could point to that wasn't ulcerous with gas, even if it wasn't organic enough to rightly have ulcers, or riddled with holes, or decayed, or slimy, or chewed up from the fighting. And basically, like, this is where Victoria is at. So we have this panic attack concept where we come to understand, okay, Switch Hitter's having a panic attack, and then we're going to see Victoria have a panic attack later, and we're primed on that because of this explanation here, and we're also primed to see that from Victoria's point of view, everything is so fucked that she doesn't even know how to calm somebody else down.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, arguably, you did mention that she's having trouble breathing as she's carrying. She's arguably having a mini panic attack of her own right now. And part of... she does eventually get to a place where she can ground her via her past.
Right.
So she does eventually find some of that ground. But I do feel like this is like the stepping stones to that full-blown breakdown, right? Where she's still at the end of this able to find something to stand on with Switch Hitter. But that's not going to happen when it's happening to herself.
Like you said, it's the past. It's nothing to do with the present. And the present, as far as Victoria is concerned, is fucked beyond repair. So.
Yeah. We do learn that Switch Hitter is most likely bi based on her name. And there's this, as she's just exploring the past, Legend didn't quite make things like perfect and wonderful for LGBTQ people, as the authorities would have probably had you believe pre-Gold Morning, right? Like that was the big thing. It's like Legend came out and he was so popular that just, yay, everything was fine. And of course, that was never true. But it is good to kind of see that coming out of one of our characters. And I love Switch Hitter.
Yeah, sure. I
love
mean,
her
it
so
reminds
much. I hope we see more of her.
like I think it reminds us of Tristan, because like Tristan probably didn't face as much prejudice as he would have faced on our our world in our status quo, but he did have to put up with bigotry from at least one person, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So Victoria gets back to Foyle, who tells her that she's retreating. Victoria then tries to argue with her, to argue that this is working. We just need to keep it up. And Foyle's like, "No, you're in denial. We're losing key people. Everybody's exhausted." And she says, "Even you, Antares, it might be wearing you down more slowly, but I can see it in how you stand."
I love that so much. And I love the beat where she's like, "You can fly. I have to jump on fucking missiles to get around. And I can't. I'm exhausted." I like this, and I like the duality and the two-mindedness of Victoria's thoughts, I think, carry through perfectly into this moment, right? Where I want to go forward. I want to keep it up. It's working. We're getting there. If we just keep pushing, it's going to work. And this real recognition that everyone's exhausted and we do have to retreat. And I think that is, there's like a push and pull. There's a push and pull of her having anger and kindness towards people. There's a push and pull of her wanting to push the issue or wanting to retreat. There's this duality going on. And I really liked that. I really liked that a lot.
Yeah, me too, because she's able to recognize pretty quickly that Foyle's right. Which is good, right? Like, but the fact that she even has that moment of like, no, this is working, when like anyone can see that it's not, tells you that she's sort of losing the plot. She's sort of losing track of what's going on. She's, like I said earlier, she's losing it. Victoria then has to manage Damsel to convince her to retreat, while Solar Stare talks shit in the background. Victoria almost gets murdered, but then correctly calls Damsel's bluff and doesn't get blasted, and also doesn't preemptively pulp her.
This is so great, isn't it? I love this whole scene. Like, we talked last week about this kind of mini, not behind the scenes, but like not in focus push and pull that was going on between Damsel and Victoria. And I incorrectly said it was like we had reached the zenith of this when Damsel finally listens to Victoria after that moment of trust. Like, trust me, don't use your power, trust me. And it's a really important moment, and I really like it. But this is it, right? This is that conflict coming to a head. Everything that's been festering between these two, the good memories of Swan Song times, the difficulty that creates, the mourning for the lost person, and that having that person standing in front of you, it comes to this moment. And this is these two characters have never gotten quite this close to just destroying each other.
Yeah. I mean, it's really like, it's a very almost cinematic moment, right? Because it basically shows that Sveta, I don't know, I keep messing up names today. I don't know where Sveta came from. Damsel comes within, a hair's breadth of blowing her away, but then at the last second, she just kind of lets the blast dissipate. And Victoria, the wretch, has been reaching for her to grab and crush her, and then she cancels it at the last second.
Yeah.
And it's a really, it's horribly intense, right? Like you really kind of want Damsel to just not be this way anymore.
Yeah, it's really like, you're just really like, come on. Like, it's giant monsters flying around, and you're like threatening like to murder her because she wants you to take a break and retreat.
Right. I mean, it really is something that Victoria takes the amount of time and energy that she does here to try to talk Damsel down, instead of just being like, all right, fine, fuck off. You stay. Like, you're not the Ashley I knew, right? Like, I mean, that's not how she feels, clearly, right? She has complicated feelings toward Damsel, because she kind of does feel like there's some of Ashley in there.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that she hangs around to talk to her and to try to persuade her reveals how much she does actually care about this Damsel.
Especially since we kind of see Sveta give up, right? Sveta's just like, fine, just leave her. Let's go. And you could argue that was part of a negotiating tactic, I suppose. But I also think Sveta has a very complicated relationship with Ashley. She has throughout the entire book. And so this could just be, she's like, I don't want to fucking deal with this.
I think Sveta like basically said like, yeah, we weren't really friends. And plus Sveta's been dealing with her shit for like I don't know, however long this fight's been going on, trying to like be the conciliator between her and Solar Stare, who delightful Solar Stare. I only wish we had seen more of Solar Stare just needling Damsel as this fight was going on.
Yeah, good whole interlude of Solar Stare needling Damsel, please.
Absolutely, yes.
There's one more point I want to talk about in this. There's this moment where I forget exactly what she says to Damsel, but we see Damsel's reaction. We see, I saw emotions cross her face, and then I saw new emotions take over. And of course, this is very much in line with what we've seen in Damsel in the past, where Victoria has looked at her and seen Swansong in there sometimes. But it also is a good reflection of kind of that two-mindedness, that duality of feeling that we're seeing in Victoria right now. The Damsel has that kind of same thing where she's feeling these different things at the same time, and Damsel is kind of making decisions on which of those feelings she's going to prioritize and which she's going to stuff away. But I wonder, Damsel, like Ashley in general is a very unique case in this world, right? A clone, they had much more interaction with the shard space stuff than just about anyone else through their dreams, I believe. Are we hinting at something here? Like, is there kind of like long-term setup here? Like, we're connecting the duality of Victoria's emotions to this kind of these two different emotions flashing over Damsel? Are we trying to? I'm just guessing. I haven't actually formulated a hypothesis on this, but I find it interesting.
I like this idea that a lot of what's going on with Victoria right now has to do with the facets of Victoria that we don't quite know if we got the same Victoria out of the shard world that went into it. We know that Damsel is now this complicated product of all of the different facets of Damsel that went into making Damsel in the first place. There's some swan song in there. And I can see all, I'm kind of like you, where I'm like, I see all of these ideas in a big mixing pot, and I don't really know exactly how to tease them out into a structure that I can say this is what's going on here thematically. But I think it's just something to continue to pay attention to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what's a fun thing about this book is that it tosses those things into the air, right? And you're just like, oh, look, there's a thing, and I like this, and it kind of fits in with this. I'm not ready to conclude on it yet. I think if the book is going to grab this out of the air and connect it to something else, oh, that'll be cool. It might not, but it just gets you thinking about those kind of things. And I don't know, I enjoy the way this book does that. That there's always all this stuff up in the air that you're like, well, I could put these together, and that might be something. It might not. I don't know. It's fun. It's fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I like that a lot, because not everything has to land. We've talked about that before. Not everything has to pay off. Sometimes it's just a moment, and you appreciate it in that moment, and then it's done.
Yeah.
So Victoria then carries Gundek away as they retreat and regroup.
Yeah, please note that the jackass, unsure if he's a hero or villain cape that Victoria didn't like much earlier, team says he'll catch up with her, and then doesn't.
Yeah.
He doesn't leave. He never leaves. He's still fighting.
He's still fighting.
Still sending those tiny minions to bother the Titans.
Yep. Still covering the retreat.
Mm-hmm.
The breakthrough then touches base. Tattletale tells them that they can't retreat. They've got to keep fighting. A big 15-minute final push, because Fume Hood is still inside Eve, and they need to give her a chance to retreat.
Good Titan theory confirmed.
That's right.
At least partially.
I think so. I think what we said last week was that we do think Fume Hood is still inside the Titan in some sense, and it seems to be right. So
yeah, and she can't communicate in any clear way, but she is speaking in gibberish, aka I'm not horribly murdering you all with just so. Right. Maybe take that as a hint.
Yeah. I mean, I like the way Tattletale said it, of just like, well, she's not sending like just a wave of instant death at us, so that should be a clue.
Yeah. Have we talked? So Tattletale in this moment mentions way back when she was chopped into pieces and the gibberish she was sending to Victoria. Have we talked about that since then?
I don't think the story ever really came back to it.
It didn't.
The conclusion here is that Tattletale thought she was sending a message, and then the message Victoria was getting was gibberish, and then Victoria tried to send a message back, and then Tattletale stopped communicating. I think because she was like, "Oh, I see what's happening. My message is clearly not getting through because I'm
getting gibberish back."
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this is one of those instances where if you are part of this community while the book was coming out, you knew this because this is something Wildbow clarified, because I think a lot of people spent a lot of time on this, and I'm so glad I didn't spend that much time on it. We spent a little bit of time trying to crack it, but I think it was clarified. But it's come back and been clarified in the book. So another one of those interesting, unique ways in which following these books as they're being written gives you a little bit different experience than if you were reading it all said and done.
What is the implication of the fact that if you get put through the shard interdimensional ringer, your communication comes out as gibberish? Like, is it to say that is this connected to this idea that you can't just talk to the shards?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, I think the importance in this moment is that we can't chat with the Titans. Whatever shard stuff is going on with the Titans, their ability to communicate has been so severely hampered that we can't do it anymore. And you could argue that this is similar to the stuff we saw in Kepri, right? Like one of the first things that, well, not one of the first, but one of the things that happened to Taylor as she was being subsumed by the shard was her ability to communicate was taken away. And so we could see this could be reflecting that same kind of idea. As far as does that relating to what was happening with Tattletale, does that specifically connect? I don't know. I think it was an opportunity to clarify something in the text that had not been clarified, while also exploring the idea of the breakdown of communication with shardy stuff. And I don't know if it has to be more than that.
I mean, I feel like that might have even been an intentional setup. The original thing with the Tattletale communicating in gibberish, to say like there are limitations to communication when you're trying to communicate through shard bullshit. But I don't know. I mean, I think that it makes a lot of sense on a thematic level to say that there are reasons why you can't just say like, "Hey shards, let's make a transaction. You stop doing this and we'll give you this," right? Like communication and the impossibility of communication are pretty big themes here. So,
And if we look at what is a solution to this whole problem, this humans shards, what are we going to do? How do we solve it? The inability to communicate is going to be a very difficult thing in that, but maybe there's a solution, and maybe it's sitting in Victoria's head.
Maybe. But even in really tense, terrible moments like this, Aisha is still Aisha. Ooh, Imp said, "Come on, Heartbroken. Got to back Aunt Rachel up. Give me a good ooh." There was a very unenthusiastic set of oohs from three very tired, slimy, and banged up Heartbroken. Text appeared at the corner of my vision. C and D. Ooh. This is kind of that like interstitial comic relief that we were talking about a little bit last week.
Yeah, it's an Indiana Jones moment. I'm so happy we can just call them that and just be like, Indiana Jones moment.
Yeah.
It's not designed to undercut seriousness, right? It's not taking what is a serious moment and kind of poking fun at the fact that it's serious, but rather it's just a little tension relief, just a little left turn on that tension valve, just to let a little bit of that out, and it really works perfectly.
It works perfectly, I think, additionally, because we know that Imp's way of dealing with shit being absolutely wacky is to get even more like this.
Yeah.
Like when they were like crawling around in the cauldron base in either of the two times that happened in either of the two books, she's like getting particularly quippy when things are getting particularly dangerous. And that just tells you like, okay, yeah, it's funny, but also that tells you that she is actually worried.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. So tension releasing, consistent.
Yep.
Wow. I love it.
Yep.
There is a moment here that I wanted to talk about before we move on, though. They're told, basically, as Tattletale is telling them that they need to do this final push, and Victoria looks at her team, and the moment is they all nodded. And the text is basically pointing out to us why they shouldn't be nodding. Rain is exhausted and practically useless. His powers aren't that strong. Sveta is tired. Tristan, she describes as heartbroken. Everyone is so tired. They're not even sure they're going to be able to help in this final push. But everyone on our team nods and is like, yep, okay, let's do it. And I don't know. Like, that's a powerful moment for me. Like, this concept of everyone's tired, everyone's back up against a wall. We've just retreated because we were all on the verge of collapse. And now we're told, can you give me 15 more minutes? And she looks at her team and everyone's just like, yep, okay.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about Breakthrough is that they're just this, like they were selected to be this team of people who never stop fighting, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel like none of them, you know, and that includes Swansong, are the type to ever stop fighting no matter what. Like, yeah. Which is almost not really almost, like, which is actually to their detriment sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah, absolutely.
Somebody needs to be there to kind of say, hey, this is the time to stop fighting, actually.
Yeah. Sometimes there are those times, and maybe this is one of them.
Yeah. So Foil notices that Parian is having a silent breakdown in the background.
Whoa.
And Tattletale tells her to stay away because she doesn't want to lose her nerve to do what she's about to do.
And what is she about to do, Matt?
And I saw her approach the rows of bodies, people covered in sheets, some with people standing by them. She took the sheets, drawing out threads and weaving them together. Then, with telekinetic control over fine blades, she began cutting into the bodies. Some had been crushed, some had been cut, others afflicted with gas, their skin ulcerous. Oh my God, I heard Foil. She pressed her hands over her mouth. Flayed skin sewn to skin, like Parian had used cloth before, orifices sealed, shut. Many people became parts of a wider canvas. That canvas, with many dead, began to take form.
Holy shit.
Holy shit. And then when Scotty reacts to the threat, because she always reacts to the greatest threat, the skin puppet wrestles the Titan to the ground.
Holy shit. And all it took was a bunch of dead humans.
Yep.
I like the detail. I say I have like in very big quotes, but I like the detail where when she runs out of like material, she uses hair and tendons to actually do the sewing. It's a great little horrible touch on that.
Just make it as like once she's crossed this line, it's almost like, why not just go all the way and just like, this is what your power has always wanted you to do anyway, is use human bodies for your raw materials.
Yeah.
So go for it.
Yeah, and so we kind of jumped the gun and talked about this a lot already, but so in this moment, we see Foil is just absolutely horrified, and she takes that horror and kind of turns it on Tattletale, where she's like, "You knew about this, didn't you? How long ago did you know? You're the one that told her. You shouldn't have told her." And we see this moment where Tattletale's like, "She kind of always knew. It's always been about skin." And I wanted to talk to you about that because I should have looked up what Parian's trigger event was before. I have the very like loose thread of of what it was, but how do you think it was always about skin?
Well, part of it is this idea that I've seen. This is not my original idea. That, you know, Parian has distinctive South Asian skin tone, and that the guy who was harassing her. So the story is that this guy in her college classes was kind of harassing her and kind of wouldn't take no for an answer. And she eventually did actually give in and date him just because that was easier than dealing with the harassment and him spreading rumors about her. And the implication is that he for whatever reason was kind of obsessed about her skin, like her skin color. This was a sort of a fetish for him, perhaps. That's never really stated, but I think that you can read between the lines and say, like, that's why he showed so much interest in her in particular.
Yeah. And
so it's about her skin tone, and then her father dies. So we have the element of death and a dead body that's present, and just all of these things kind of mixing together. I think there's also something there with like the idea of distance and isolation and lack of positive like physical contact with anyone, which again that's sort of related to skin too. I remember having this all kind of nailed down in my head back when I first put, back when Cyrus kind of helped me put all the clues together, and a lot of time has passed since then, and I haven't really thought about it. But yeah, I think the fact that Parian is Indian has always been a major thing that kind of at front and center with her. Like when it came to her Cape identity, she wanted to challenge assumptions about race and so forth. Like that's why she has this European Parian style doll mask and skin covering outfit to hide the fact that she has the skin color that she has.
Yeah.
So that was literally always there, the fact that she considers it important, actually.
Yeah, that's great. I love all of that. That's really great.
Cool.
I want to talk about the duality of this moment, because that's something we've been talking about all chapters, right? Where throughout this entire chapter, we've been talking about how things feel two different ways, how she's angry and wants to comfort, how they want to retreat and they want to fall back. And in this moment, Victoria says, this is horrifying and noble in equal measure, right? Both the two sides thing is really evident throughout everything that goes on here, that this is horrible. This is the worst thing ever. Like we see her girlfriend is looking on in horror, and the text says, and she wasn't the only one, which is like just to be like, you don't have to say any more than that. It's just enough to know all these heroes on the field are looking at this thing happening and are just horrified of this person and what they're doing. And I don't know, there's something incredible about that. Like, and tragic. Like they reach their stalemate, they reach their tie because of what Parian does here, because of that line that Parian decides to cross, and it's going to change her forever. It's going to change her relationships forever, not just with her girlfriend. Yes, certainly with her girlfriend, but with every cape she interacts with. Every single hero saw her do this, basically, and how they approach her, how they deal with her, it's going to be forever changed.
Yeah. I think you're exactly right. It's crushing to who Parian is and who she's wanted to be, and worked really hard to try to be. Just before we move on from the topic of Parian and Foil, all the way back in the part of the story where they were fighting Nursery, Foil was basically talking about how all of the horrifying shit really got to her, like Nursery's power specifically, I think, was something that just really bothered her in a way where she's like, I can't fucking do this anymore. Like if this is what being a cape means, I don't think I want to be a cape anymore. I don't remember exactly what she said. It was a long time ago, but I feel like that was laying the groundwork for this moment where she realizes that the person with I don't know about the most horrifying, but one of the more horrifying parahuman powers is Parian.
It's certainly up there.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because I had forgotten that conversation. But yeah, that was laying the tracks for this moment, and why this is so disturbing to Foil, because she is. I think she says something to be like, people get used to it, right? Like you're around it for so long, and you eventually just get used to it. But that's not happening to me, and I don't think it's ever going to happen to me. And so, not only is this horrifying that you've seen another side of the person you're with, but it's especially horrifying for her. Yeah,
exactly. Just like for me, I often have pretty good visual imagination, but like I had to actually kind of make myself visually imagine what this looks like, and you have to kind of be reminded, like there's now a whole bunch of flayed corpses lying around, and then there's this bloody, Wildbow describes it well enough, but that doesn't necessarily trigger the visualization for me. Yeah. It's fucking horrifying.
Well, in the next chapter, we see, as the battle is coming to a close, the bodies have been carted away, and Parian's creation has deflated. So there's just this
skin
bag hanging out on the battlefield.
That's so good.
Yeah.
So all this is cool and everything, but remember, we're getting this reveal along with the reveal that Rachel's power works better on half-breeds, which is, I think, a new reveal.
I think so.
And this is coming like a chapter after Tristan and Vicky had this conversation about powers shifting and powers reacting to traumatic experiences. It's basically just like a lot of talk in the latter part of this arc about powers wonkery and true uses and changes in power.
Yeah, those are really good dots to connect. I think It's like we were talking about earlier, that's a bunch of stuff that's been thrown up into the air, and you're just kind of connecting them together in interesting ways. We are exploring the design behind all of this as we prepare to, I think, really start to explore the designers in a way that the book has never done before.
I think so.
So that's
and
really
as
cool.
as the chapter wraps up, Victoria flies screaming back into the fight.
Oh my God. That moment, Matt, where she's just like, I'm screaming because my wretch can't.
I thought that was really particularly interesting along this reading of like the merging of personalities, because you're like, so that means she thinks that the wretch would want to be screaming,
right? Yeah,
which is kind of a mind to mind thing.
Sure. Yeah, I drew on my partner's power to deliver the first blows of the second round, screaming while I did because she couldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not
Intense.
only she's called her partner in the past. But the phrase "drawing on my partner's power," I don't know. It's like It's not even my power anymore. It's her power, and I'm just drawing on it. That's interesting.
True. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot that is a really interesting sentence in all kinds of ways. Mm-hmm. So as we move into 18.7, the first line: the 5-pound phone I carried blared. I had to ignore it. So communication attempted and denied due to incredible danger.
Don't worry, I'm sure it's not important.
I mean, like again, we have the 5-pound phone. Like we made the connection to the 5 pounds of gun.
Yeah.
Which is, so that's already setting us off. We're making these connections between 18.7 and 1.1. We talked about the 5 pounds of gun there. We have a 5-pound phone. Again, she's being called and she's ignoring the call, or actually. Yeah, she actually did have to ignore calls from Carol or texts from Carol in that chapter because of the stuff that happened. Anyway, we're going to get into it. Legend pummels Scotty and then he gets injured.
I, of course, have no ability to actually remember this, but have we ever seen Legend injured?
The only time I remember is when Leviathan snags him and it's described as just looking like a crazy light show as he falls out of the sky, but we don't actually like see the consequence of that.
Okay. I think like Legend has been this presence in the story for so long that the idea of like him being hurt is so like beyond belief for me that it's just like, holy shit.
Right. So Victoria flies in and then literally squeezes herself in under Scotty's armor in an attempt to get in meaningful wounds. And then she gets her foot crushed on the way out. She feels frustrated beyond reason, and this is the part where she compares her mental state to a child destroying her own toys in a rage.
Yeah, her toys in this case being her body. I really like this because we began this chapter with Victoria almost immediately getting injured. And throughout this big fight, we've seen her frustrated, we've seen her exhausted, we've seen her jump to anger, we've seen the stalemate, people getting tired. Victoria herself has had a few close calls, but she hasn't actually gotten hurt yet. And then bam, at the start of this chapter, immediately hurt. I think we're seeing a shift right now, right? Like we're shifting away. Like a lot of what we're doing here, we had mental exhaustion, we had emotional exhaustion, mental damage, emotional damage. Now we're starting to get the physicals coming in too. She's actually just getting hurt. And I think it shifts things a little because every moment from here on out is just Victoria getting hurt in one way or another.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, it changes because until now she's been watching people get hurt all around her, and by the end of this chapter, she's just a mess.
Yep.
So speaking of which, Victoria gets swatted out of the air by Oberyn too fast to stop herself with flight. All she can do is aim for the cracks in the ground and scrape through, injuring herself further and ending up briefly in the Shard Realm, where I'm sure nothing bad happens to her and she's fine. And then she flies up out of there and she's called and she answers the phone and they tell her to retreat.
Yeah, this is one of those moments in the story that it seems very specifically set up to set up something, right? Because it's just this moment. Like it doesn't push the plot forward in any way. Like she's thrown to the ground. She slips into the Shard Realm to survive. She's in there momentarily. Her flight kind of works. Her aura barely works. The force field struggles to come back up. And then she leaves and it's done. And we just move on. And we're just like, oh, okay, that was just a fun little jaunt in there. Just to remind everyone that that's there still. Nothing else. No, nothing else. No other
Right.
reaction to that at all.
Not planting seeds for anything or.
Nope,
Yeah.
nope. And I think we'll talk about what those seeds could possibly be in a little bit. But there's a lot to say. There's a lot to say about how this particular moment could be playing, because it's obviously doing something, right? Like there's a purpose this happened. It's not just going to happen in the story. We just move on and be like, no, we just wanted to remind the reader that the Shard Realm exists. That was it. That was it.
I mean, the least that we're doing with it is we're establishing like this is what it's like down there.
Right.
Remember that it's like that for later.
Mm-hmm.
But I suspect it's a bit more than that.
Yeah.
So we learned that Dauntless, not Titan Kronos, because we're in Victoria's point of view and she calls him Dauntless now, has been keeping all the other Titans away from Fortuna with his arc lance, while Fortuna just kind of sits there.
This is the question I had thinking of this. Has she ever called him Titan Kronos? Has she ever used that name, or has in Victoria's mind it always been Dauntless? I don't know.
I feel like she's used Titan Kronos before, but now I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I mean, with the one thing we didn't talk about is in the last chapter, she basically, once she was told Fume Hood is still inside Eve, she goes, Eve, no, Fume Hood, she's still there, and has like specifically decided this is Fume Hood. Fume Hood is in there, so I'm going to call that Fume Hood. And so is this a subconscious linking? Like she knows Fume Hood's connected to Dauntless, and therefore the assumption is if Fume Hood's in there somewhere, maybe Dauntless is in there somewhere, which is something that we, the reader, do know, but we haven't seen anyone tell Victoria yet. Or has she just always been calling it that? I think it's a change in reflection to her attitude towards Fume Hood. But if she's always just called him that, then I'm wrong. But
I mean, I think this is not my original thought, but I think there's a suggestion that the reason why she kept slipping and calling Eve Fume Hood was because her shard was trying to tell her something. Her shard was trying to say, no, she's in there. Kind of. I mean, we've definitely seen her shard give her intuition from shard dimension. You know?
Yeah, that's certainly true. Yeah,
this is one instance where that would make a lot of sense. Like you keep slipping and calling her Fume Hood, and it turns out you're actually right. Now she's just kind of going with it. She's like, yeah, that's Dauntless, that's Fume Hood, that's Titan Scotty. You know, her mm-hmm. she's never slipped and accidentally called Oberon
Moose or Prancer. Yeah,
right. Yeah. So
yeah, you're right. So I like that. I like that as another symptom of whatever's going on with Shard Buddy.
Yep. So Victoria flies over to Fume Hood, having been told to retreat, and just kind of talks to her quietly for a bit, just in case her words or even just her mere presence can help the woman. And it's really sweet and heartbreaking.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things about Victoria as a character, and maybe just like as a person in this story, is when she recognizes a kindred spirit somewhere, the way she reacts to that always warms my heart. Like, she sees Fume Hood trapped inside this giant body, and she connects that feeling to the feeling she had while she was in the hospital. And so she knows everything that I would have wanted while I felt in that hospital, I'm going to try to give you right now. You did good. You're doing good. You're a hero. She calls her by her name, not even Fume Hood. She calls her by her name.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. Yeah. I mean, it's tragic because like on some level we wonder, can she even really understand what's going on here? But it's just this moment of just extending courtesy to a person that might be all that stands between your existence and non-existence. I love it. It's so beautiful. It really, really touched me.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's going to happen with these Titans, but regardless, I think this was a really great moment for Victoria, especially after we're going to just see her from here. Just,
right.
It gets bad from here.
I mean, it hit me how she kind of offers herself to be the Sveta to Fume Hood's wretch. And that's a powerful thing for her to be, the framing of it, I think is really what hits you.
Sure.
Yeah.
So before we go on, though, I think many people have kind of related this back to some other stuff we've seen, right? to Imp being the voice over Taylor's shoulder in her final moments. People have also rightly related this imagery back to the Seamerg perched on Dauntless and now Contessa's shoulder. I like the first one. I like the Imp one and not the Seamerg one because that's much less ominous.
Yeah, that is. I don't. I'll be surprised if this turns out to be like a big complicated theory crafting thing. I thought it was just like a sweet moment, but anything can happen.
Sure.
Cool. So Victoria then returns to the Fallen Camp. We actually just kind of cut back to the Fallen Camp.
We do a section break.
Yeah. And she has this terrible run-in with her quote-unquote old friend, Shortcut. She tells him to get bent, which is just an insult that I've never managed to use in real life, which I really regret.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah?
Get bent.
Oh.
I just wanted to use it.
Oh, thank you.
Don't be mad.
No, it hurt.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
So Shortcut sucks, right?
Oh yeah. Oh my God. He sucks so much. Do we let's pretend that not everyone reading remembers who Shortcut is. So where's the first time we met Shortcut, Matt?
Chapter 1.
Shortcut was our friend that Victoria bumped into after the car wreck at the very, very beginning of the book, who didn't know she was a cape at the time, and they had a nice little chat and everything seemed cool. And then Shortcut found out that Victoria was a cape a little bit later, and he did not take it well. And He has taken that and made it even worse.
He has used this to justify this festering hatred of Victoria.
Yeah, I mean, he prevented her from getting on advanced guard. He's basically shit-talked her every time he's seen her. And now in this moment where capes are basically like falling apart, he sees her and it's just like, I'm mad and I'm going to take my shit out on Victoria because why not?
Yeah, you're injured. I mean, it was funny because we were all having so much fun ragging on how much we hate Shortcut in the Discord, and then I started to be like, think of trigger events for Shortcut and imagine that it was like someone saying to him like, God, now I can't remember what it was.
It's like you made good time or something.
Yeah, good response time.
Yeah.
Good response time as he like arrives too late to save his family from Scion or something. Just because it's fun to imagine that there's actually a good reason why he's this way, but that's just because I enjoy doing that kind of thing.
I mean, he's a Wildbow character, so I'm sure there's a reason, whether or not it's good. Like,
the cool logical reason.
The cool thing is we can call him a giant dick because he is, but we can also understand that he's a cape, and therefore he has some terrible shit that happened to him in his past, and perhaps exactly what Victoria unknowingly did set him off in a way that she couldn't possibly understand.
Right. And that's probably the case, right? But I still enjoy making fun of Shortcut.
Yes, of course. Yeah. And so I think this is a really interesting scene because, we talk about unreliable narrator sometimes, and we talk about just this idea of do we have point of view bias, right? And so we have this person, and we have Shortcut who is like throwing insults at our protagonist. And how do we communicate that, hey, there's no point of view bias here, right? Like that actually he's being a dick. And we do that by having everyone around him also say he's being a dick.
Right.
The leader on his team, someone else in his group says, fuck off, man.
Yeah.
Just imagine this scene if everyone else around him just stayed silent. If as he was ragging on her, nobody spoke up, nobody came to her defense, nobody told him to fuck off, nobody told him to stop, nobody basically put him in timeout. Imagine how different the scene would read. It would read as if everybody feels this way. That this is not just Shortcut, world's biggest asshole, that has this grudge against Victoria, which of course it is, but if everyone else was silent, then you as the reader start to go, oh, maybe the things that he's saying are things that everyone else has been saying too. And it is very possible they still could be, but I think the idea of having the people on his team actively like say, no, dude, you're being an asshole. Stop it. Sit down. Shut up. To the point where like he's almost willing to fight them about it. I think is carrying forward like this is someone that has just been, this is how he reacts to being pushed to his limit.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I mean, I doubt that Resound and Shortcut ever get into arguments on the level where he says, fight me if you want me to listen.
Yeah.
Like it seems like a team wouldn't actually last long under those conditions. So the fact that they get to that point suggests that everybody, including them, is at their, at their wits' end, and they're just losing it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I agree with you. This is a great little scene that just shows how frazzled everyone is.
Yeah, and something I wanted to focus on while we're here is that "fuck off, man" beat, because it's really interesting.
Yeah.
One of the other guys in the group said something under his breath. It might have been "fuck off, man." I bristled, but bit back the emotion. And that's really interesting, right? Because it's almost certainly directed towards Shortcut.
Right.
Like, there's maybe like a 5% possibility that this person happened to be talking about Victoria, but I doubt it. But
she bristles.
She bristles at it. Like, there's this moment where she either thinks it's about her, or just the gut reaction to that kind of anger sets her off in a way. And that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, I think that this is just a sign of how agitated and not processing things correctly she is. Because I read that the same way. Like, I definitely noticed, like, you bristle. Why did you bristle? Like, that doesn't, like, and I think that's the thing, is when you're this, I'm running out of synonyms for like, just like beyond your capacity to deal, then yeah, you'll have emotional reactions that make zero sense, that even in the moment you're like, this, I don't know why I'm behaving this way. I'm acting like a toddler, but you'll do it anyway. And that's kind of where she is.
Yeah, I agree.
So there's this interesting moment where Shortcut says, people like her thrive on us being civil and decent and letting things slide, which I just thought was really interesting. I don't know. It's interesting that it's coming out of Shortcut's mouth too, like, because I don't know. I'm a proponent for letting things be civil and decent, and like sometimes at the expense of maybe giving them the chance to make some mistakes, but keeping things civil and decent. And then because things were civil and decent, the person who made a mistake feels like they can kind of walk back what they said. Whereas if you jump on them immediately, then they're much more likely to dig in their heels. So the idea that Shortcut is saying something I kind of agree with here, I was like, huh. Or well, no, hold on. I'm being stupid. No, Shortcut is disagreeing with me. Shortcut's an asshole. Fuck Shortcut. Yeah. Sorry, I'm splitting and processing things in two different ways at the same time. Sorry, Scott.
No, but it's fine. But my reaction to this was, I don't know if anyone would ever describe that about Victoria, like that. I guess like maybe like old Glory Girl days, but. I was very surprised to hear that projected towards Victoria. Sure.
Well, I think that he always wants to be yelling at her. And so the fact that she's quote unquote getting away with things drives him crazy.
Like just the fact that she gets to be a hero at all when he hates her.
I mean, I think everything she does offends him. So
yeah.
Like I remember when they let go the Hollow Point villains that they captured, and he was just livid about it. And I don't know.
Yeah, I forgot about that. No, that's really interesting because it's like I thought throughout this entire book that the thing that Shortcut has is just this complete lack of seeing things from someone else's perspective. He took this thing that was just this minor misunderstanding and let it turn into this festering hatred just because he just refused to listen to her perspective on it. And just be like, oh, okay, I get it. Like, you didn't mean anything. Like, I get it.
Yeah.
And so, like, we go through these moments where Victoria is having to do things that she doesn't really want to do. Like releasing the people is something that she was really pissed off about. She didn't want to have to do that. But from his perspective, it's just like, oh, look, here she is again, just releasing all. Like, yeah, I love this as a continuation of that central failure on his part to be able to see anything from her perspective.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, at this point, he sees her like a monster. Yeah, like if he was the protagonist, and Wildbow is writing the story, there's a good chance that we would hate Victoria because we would be getting fed his little narrative about how she's just the worst.
Sure.
I don't know that now I'm kind of curious what that would look like. But anyway, so Victoria totally wins this encounter, but critically, I don't think she feels like she won the encounter. And it really doesn't make her feel any better. She still feels childish, and she feels like she sunk to his level.
Yeah. And I mean, she did, right? Like, I'm sure it felt really good in the moment, and I really liked her epic "your costume sucks" burn.
Right.
You loved it. Everybody loved it. But
right.
Yeah, it was childish. And I did like this moment where she's like, I'd held back enough today, playing nice with Defiant, holding back with Eric. I was fucking done. She's not going to do that anymore. No holding back. No holds barred.
No holds barred. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that I find the phrasing of playing nice with Defiant. It's like but I mean, you were just professional. I guess that was, I mean, I guess, whatever. Okay.
I think that's just a reframing based out of frustration.
Yeah. Right. So Victoria then enters what I'm calling the dogs phase of the chapter, which is just dogs. Everybody's playing with and covered in dogs. Scott, what does humanity have that no other alien species defeated by the entities has had? What makes us special and unique? No, it's not dreams. It's dogs.
It is dogs. This has been set up since the Valkyrie interlude where a dog got powers. The answer is dogs. It all makes sense. You did it, Matt. It's dogs.
Yep.
And thus, Rachel becomes the key to everything.
She's the key to all this. Yeah. I agree.
I love dogs.
You're right.
I really love dogs.
I do too. So Sveta and Rain are apparently having a sit down with Tristan, or that's Victoria's assumption. My theory, well, there's so many possible theories from this goddamn chapter.
This is a very weird chapter, and I don't mean that in a bad way.
Oh no,
it just feels very strange.
Yes, it feels like everything is a bit off in a way that the more like, okay, I probably read this chapter like 4 times.
Yeah.
And everything that's off about it, I feel has purpose behind it.
Yeah.
So like this thing where Sveta and Rain and Tristan are off somewhere having some conversation. Sure, it could just be that they're having a sit down with Tristan and giving him a pat on the back and making him feel better about his emotional state. But like, that doesn't feel right to me. And maybe we'll find out that's the case. But like, I don't know. Maybe they're planning on having an intervention with Victoria because she's like clearly freaking out and they can see it and she can't. Perhaps like something Amy related happened on a different battlefield and they're trying to like figure out how to broach that to her. Perhaps it's just something like way like worse that we're not even thinking of. I don't know. I don't even know why I'm so suspicious about this. It's just, it makes me so uneasy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're very deliberate and explicit to her. Do not go. Right.
Yeah.
I understand on a surface level, like Rain is much closer to Tristan than Victoria is. I guess it's I'm not going to call them it untrue that Sveta is closer to Tristan than Victoria is. I don't remember that, but that certainly could have been set up and I've just forgot it. So I'm not just going to be like, I don't think that's true.
I think they went shopping once.
I definitely think Victoria's relationship with Breakthrough is very weird, in that she's very, very close with some of them and close, but not as close with others. So like, I think there is a certain level of understanding around that Tristan's going through some really, really bad shit. He wants the closest people around him right now and nobody else. We're going to lock out Kenzie because of that. But they are very deliberate. Like, do not go there. Like Candy, right. I think it's Candy or Chastity. It's one of them is just like, don't go there. And
right. Don't look in. Don't use the eye cam.
Well, they've taken their eye cams out. Remember?
Oh, that's true.
Which is
right, which is even more suspicious to me. Yeah, I mean, I get it. Like if I mean, I don't know why this pops into my head, but like if you're at like a hangout or something, and somebody's like, hey, don't go in that room. So and so and so and so are having a kind of emotional discussion. You just be like, yeah, sure, whatever. And then like you walk into like another room, and then the person in there's like, hey, don't go in there.
Right.
They're having an emotional discussion. Like, okay, what the fuck's going on? Like why is this so serious?
Yeah, well,
it becomes weird at a certain point.
it does become weird, and it's like, what's the worst that could happen? If this is the discussion that's happening, the worst that could happen is she walks in the door and they're like, hey, go away.
Yeah.
we would like you not to be here right now. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's not like Tristan has ever disliked her, right?
Yeah.
So her showing up, it wouldn't be like, you fucked it up, right? It would just be, okay, you're here now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's weird, man. It's just freaking me out.
And this is one of like 20 different moments throughout this chapter where I'm like, oh, this is weird.
It really is. Yeah. Yeah. So
I don't know.
Yeah. So Victoria finds Kinsey cradling some very tiny puppies and having a very hard time with the idea. She says, I ruin everything I like because I like them too much. You can't like a dog too much, Rachel said.
She's right.
And then I cried.
She's right. You can't. There's so much love. It's the most pure, beautiful.
It's true.
Love ever. Dogs are life.
Beings on Earth, yes. Natural selection basically selected them to be the perfect organism.
That's it. We just give a puppy to each and every shard. We're fucking fine.
Yeah.
There's a lot to love in this Kenzie conversation. I mean, the reflection on the dog is a perfect way to kind of show her general concerns and her self-deprecating nature. She's like, I'm going to hurt this puppy. I'm going to do, even a puppy is going to turn me down. Even a puppy is going to say, no, too much. Go away. I just love that. I love it. Like, as this perfect reflection of everything we've been worried about on her, about her forever. And Rachel is there to be like, nah, you don't got to worry about this. Trust me. Mm-hmm. This is, I understand the way you feel, but you don't have to worry about this.
Yeah, totally. It's beautiful. Oh, Rachel, you're the best character.
I love her so much.
We
this
get
is
some
sorry,
more.
Sorry, go ahead. This is the moment where we get the third beat of, hey, dragon, call dragon.
Yeah.
Like, we have this moment at the beginning of this chapter where Victoria is like, I tried to call it, like, there's a time jump between Victoria jumping off of Fume Hood and Victoria landing in the Fallen camp. There's a time jump that happens there. And we learn in the time jump, Victoria contacted Dragon, and Dragon was like, it's not right now. I'm busy. And then we get another beat here of Victoria saying to Kenzie, I heard Dragon left me a message, and she's like, yeah, just contact her later. And it's just like, we're hitting this over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's building it up into, I mean, I don't know if it's building it up necessarily, but it is definitely like, okay, yeah,
emphasizing.
It's definitely going to be a thing that happens in the near future. Yeah. Foil and Parian watch. Foil is now off with her old New York PRT teammates. Get to take in some space, I guess. There's just a lot of stuff going on between all of our beloved second string characters. I mean, in this scene, like, we have all this stuff going on with Cassie, Chastity, other Heartbroken. We're not going to even have time to talk about it today. It's just like, it's such a full chapter of just like all of this stuff happening.
And of course, we have to remember Titan Watch 2019 is ongoing. We didn't talk about Shortcut, but Shortcut was just put in timeout, and all his entire team flew away, and he's left by himself. That's Titan potential. Parian and Foil's relationship strain that seems like their connection has been severed or damaged a little bit. That's potential for Titanhood there. But not here, because Rachel showed up with a bunch of puppies.
Yes.
But that acknowledges how dire things are, right? When Rachel's like, "Oh fuck, I got to get out the big guns," which is more dogs.
Yeah, absolutely surround these children with puppies. Yeah.
And it's only, what did she say? It's like, it's barely all the dogs. Like, Victoria's like, "Oh, she brought all the dogs." All the dogs.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. So, Victoria then she's trying to find. I forget who she's trying to find.
She's trying to find Tattletale.
She's trying to find Tattletale, but she accidentally finds her way to the church.
Yeah, she's looking for the community center,
Yes. Chapter 1.1 watch again.
So we're going over again. She get her phone buzzes.
Yep.
She
ignores a call.
She bumps into a Shortcut and has an altercation with him. Now she's heading towards the community center. Doesn't quite get there, but she's heading towards community center. That's an arc 1 event. It's interesting, and I don't know, this could just be a mistake, but earlier in the chapter it was called like a civil center, and then it morphs to community center after there's been a reference to Victoria's after her fight with Shortcut. It morphs to community center. And I was like, is this something going on in Victoria's head? But I think someone else calls it community center too.
I think Jester also calls it community center. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know, but
I mean, it's there though, right? Like it's a specific, thing that is not cropped up elsewhere in the story. So.
Yeah. But my chocolate theory was like, she's like transforming these things to things from her past.
Or something, yes. Yeah. I mean, and then, of course, the next thing that happens is she runs into Uncle Mike, who, again, is a character who is sort of in... Well, okay, so Uncle Mike is mentioned in Chapter 1 specifically because Carol literally texts, Michael will be coming by.
Yeah, he is at the
he's
barbecue.
At the barbecue. Well, we only hear about what happened at the barbecue. We don't see him there, but he's totally in Arc 1, and he's mentioned in Chapter 1. So, yeah. So, okay, speaking of Uncle Mike, when she sees him, it says, it took me a second to connect the face to the mask. Scott, she only recognized her own uncle by connecting it with his superhero mask. Dear God. Anyway, I think this whole section with Uncle Mike is what I called, we've got Ward catnip earlier.
Yeah, it's a very lengthy conversation that we're going to have a lot to talk about. Absolutely. And I love, before we get into the conversation in general, I just want to talk about the setup of it. She goes looking for the community center, and she says, okay, the community center is probably like the biggest, fanciest building in this place. So I'm just going to go to what looks like the nicest building. And she forgets that they're in a fallen encampment, and therefore the nicest building in town is probably a church. And so she inadvertently ends up in a church, and inside the church, they basically turned it into a makeshift medical treatment place. So she's there, and someone looks at her and sees how damaged she is and how hurt she is, and it's like, do you want medical attention? And she's like, oh, fine, okay, I'll do this. And that's where she bumps into Uncle Mike because he's working at the church. But I do think this is an interesting setting for a conversation, right? Because a church is a place for spiritual healing. It's been converted into a place for physical healing. And Victoria, while there, touches base with an old family member and maybe does a little bit of relationship healing before her hair starts falling out and that all goes down the tube. But there is a moment here where she's seemingly genuinely bonding with an uncle that she just doesn't really know at all.
Yeah, I mean, she definitely has a moment of peace here, which is like horribly shattered. And in fact, it's drawn into stark relief by the fact that she like suddenly realizes later that she's surrounded by injured people and it's horrible. And if anything, it's like a whiplash effect that makes it feel even worse to her. But yeah, there's this nice little interlude of peace and connection. You know, she I'm going out of order a bit, but she gets a hug from him, right? Like we've commented many times, or the last few arcs, like she keeps kind of reaching out to offer like physical comfort to people, a hand on the shoulder, a hug. Never really getting any that feels good. Like, yeah, she got some one-on-one time with Annalise, but like literally hasn't thought about it since then. Yeah. So like this hug from him actually, I think, is kind of a important thing. Although even in that moment, it's like ripped away from her immediately, right? So I guess you could say that doesn't end up being super good either.
Yeah, and it almost reinforces the fact that you touching me bad. Only me touch you.
True.
I mean, honestly, when this conversation started and she sees someone and like goes, oh, awkward. Yeah. I was like, oh fuck, it's Annalise. This is going to be a fun conversation. Didn't end up being true, but
yeah. So Victoria does a quick master stranger on Mike, and he tells her a memory about a time that she basically prayed to be a superhero as a young child. And she smiles at the memory, and he doesn't.
So I know this is going to sound a little bit hypocritical after we were just like super suspicious of everything that's going on in this chapter, but isn't it fascinating how immediately suspicious she gets of this guy? Like,
Yeah, I think so. Like just why it did seem a bit out of left field. Like, really? Like you think there's a plausible chance that there could be like a Master Stranger thing happening right now?
yeah.
I mean,
like,
it's not fully out of character for her, but is a bit weird. Yeah.
yeah. Like what is the threat? Like what's going on here? Is this like, if this is a Master Stranger situation truly, what's the play? Like what are people trying to do to her in this moment?
I think she's just freaked out, man.
Yeah,
I think that's the point. Actually, is like, yeah.
I mean, she describes him healing her as incestuous, kind
Right.
of. Like, I think that's such a powerful word in this moment. Like, he's just treating her wounds. She's hurt, and so he's touching her bare skin because he's treating it, because it got really scraped up and her foot might be broken. And she describes it as incestuous. It's such a powerful moment, and of course relates to how she feels about family touching her in general, right? Like, I think that's really powerful. But the thing that actually sets her onto this Master Stranger stuff is when he asks who is in your corner and who isn't. And it's basically Mike's way of saying, like, I'm about to talk like mad shit about this family. I need to know which of these people you actually like in case I talk shit about one of the ones that you like.
Yeah.
Fortunately, that's not anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Just Crystal's in her corner, and I've never expressed any kind of suspicion that anything weird is going on with Crystal. So
Not at all. Crystal.
So it's good. Yeah.
Is fine, and nothing bad is ever going to happen.
Yeah. There hasn't been any weird foreshadowing about her. So, yeah. And then, I mean, I don't even know where to start with the Mike stuff, but I guess it's my job to figure that out. So
yeah.
So there's basically three things broadly that I want to talk about in this conversation, at least. One is the great big info dump on the OG days of New Wave and the childhood of Carol, Sarah, and Mike. The next would be Mike's outsider perspective on Victoria that enables him to see the Dallin stuff that's going on with her that she doesn't see herself. And then I think a possible third is like Mike is kind of biased in his own way. Like he thinks of himself as an outsider. He says he's not really part of the family, but I think what he really is he's an ex-insider. And like all of his criticisms of the Dallins are all very personal, and he's clearly still, a member of their family. He's their sibling. I don't know if you can escape that just by running away and saying, "Oh, I'm not part of that anymore." Those are my bullet points.
I like that a lot. I mean, I like the difference between outsider and ex-insider. Like they kind of go to the same place, but they go there from a very different direction, and I like it.
Yeah. So first, I mean, we learned that the parents, after the girls were kidnapped and triggered, the parents sent the kids away to boarding school. So
all of them,
all three of them, including Mike, who really resented the fact that he was swept up into that. The parents really just suck ass, and I feel really bad for everyone here. Basically, you have this idea of generational trauma beginning even prior to, like it kind of seems like they were bad parents even before their kids triggered. If that was their response to their kids desperately needing help, was, oh, get away from us.
Yeah, all of you. Not even their son who did not trigger. Still, you go too. We can only do things all or nothing in this family. And I think Mike actually says that specifically. And I mean, it's certainly not good people. And it is, of course, this idea of trauma begets trauma. Like, Victoria was not sent away by her parents, but she did go away, and they basically, cut off contact, and that was her great anger at them, right? This idea that she was in the hospital for 2 years. They came a little bit at the beginning, then her mom, then everyone just stopped coming, and they just cut off. So it's just like we keep repeating the same mistakes over and over again.
It's a new wave. Same as the old wave.
But I think this is really powerful because, like, it's just generally interesting in this moment that we're taking a person that is connected to Victoria and her issues with her family, and being introduced to a side of it she's never quite seen before. Victoria is called Carol in this section,
Yeah.
and we don't see her react to that. Feel like there is very little internal Victoria reaction to a lot of this conversation. Like,
There's very little. Yeah, and in general, there's very little Victoria reaction to anything in this chapter, which is But continue, please.
But I mean, there's no Amy is brought up specifically, and we see nothing in Victoria's head about like her reaction to Amy being brought up. There's nothing around Carol. She is very kind of closed off emotionally, at least from our perspective. In fact, there's moments of like smiling and happiness in here.
Yes, it's just so. I think that's a big part of what feels off about her perspective in these chapters is like she's not reacting to things that she would normally be reacting to, like being compared to Carol, and she is reacting in ways like when Mike, says the memory about her lying on the floor, repeating that she wants to be a superhero. Like, I think I just don't see this Victoria necessarily smiling at that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. I mean, like it does a very specific thing, which is kind of paint the difference between Mike and Victoria. Victoria is a person who loves her powers, wanted to be a superhero.
Mm-hmm.
Mike has retired, and the only reason he came back was because your power becomes a hair trigger if you refuse to use it. It's like this cruel fate of shards. It's that they force you to be a superhero. You have no choice. But I do agree that like Victoria's trauma is based around that she really, really, really wanted to be a superhero and it wasn't happening. And she was letting everyone down, and that escalated into this basketball game where she felt ignored and no one cared because I'm not a superhero. Why does anyone care about what I'm doing? So it is a little bit surprising to think back at this moment where she's on the ground, like basically praying to every god out there, make me a superhero, please, 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 please. And just be like, oh yeah, I remember that. Those are good times. Good times.
Right. Yeah, it's funny because you can imagine that like some nascent form of waste was like lurking, like, oh, do you now? Mm-hmm. So let's also talk about Mike's perspective on the family, because basically he has this line that he says, "Carol closed her heart." That's her response to her trauma. And that's his interpretation of what's going on with her, is that she's just not open to being connected to anyone. I guess that would include her own daughter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he says, like, basically it's this idea that she only had enough room for one person. And this is something we've seen before about Carol, right? It's like for a while it was her sister, and then it was her husband. And then he says, and then presumably you and Amelia. And they're just like, well, it wasn't quite big enough for both of those, but
right, yeah, presumably, Mike,
right.
Sure. Man, yeah,
but yeah, I mean, I think it's reaffirming for Victoria, maybe for us, to see someone else talk about Carol in a way in which we've kind of analyzed her from, like this idea that someone else is saying, yeah, I see her as this person that just didn't have enough, that closed herself off to the point where she just didn't have enough bandwidth for all the people in her life and could only have, and like you look at it from a kid's perspective, and like there's part of you that wants to write that off as just like sibling stuff, right? It's like mom loves you better type of thing. But we're seeing from her brother that she behaved this way even before the kids came around, that he felt that same way, that like Carol did not have enough room for her sister and her brother, and so she chose her sister because Cape stuff, and he was just kind of left out in the cold. Yeah.
So that's sad, and that kind of fleshes out, I think, our image of Carol. And then we also have this moment where he offers her this kind of normalcy, or this opportunity to even just like taste normalcy of kind of hanging out with him and his family. And she internally just immediately rejects that. Like, it's not even really a temptation to her. And I think a big cornerstone of her rejection is this thought, isn't that right, my fragile many-handed friend? It would be risky, like we might pull apart. I could lose my control and you could lose your connection to me. So like, and that's just literally, there's no That's it. She really is afraid that if she like tries to act like a normal person, that she could lose her control and lose her connection to her shard.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's super alarming to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like we kind of present this in the Jessica argument that we've been having since the beginning of the book, which is like like should you have a civilian life and a cape life? Should those lives be different, and should you focus on each of them? Should there should be a separation? There should be a difference. That's what Jessica believes. Victoria never believed that, and this connection she's gained with her shard has only reinforced that opinion, has only reinforced that idea that now it's not only like, I don't believe that's possible, but I don't even want to try because I could lose what I've gotten. Look what I've gotten. I've done this thing. I've achieved this thing now, and it could all be taken away from me. And so I have to buy into it fully 100%.
Yeah. I like the phrasing too, where you know, I'm not surprised that she would say, I could lose my control, because that's something she obviously cares about.
Yeah.
But she says, and you could lose your connection to me. And that's the language there. It's like from the side of the shard and like imagining that the shard appreciates having this connection to Victoria, which I think we know she does because we have actually seen her point of view. But how does Victoria know that other than through the connection itself?
Yep. I think you're absolutely right.
Pretty interesting. Yeah. Moving on to Mike's personal bias, I just thought it was a bit funny and maybe ironic that he gets grumpy when Victoria says that he's like Carol. And he's like, oh, no, I'm not. And it's like, yeah, you're her brother. You probably are actually, and you're probably in denial about it. Like that's much more likely, actually.
Yeah, I mean, there's part of Mike that I see in Victoria a lot, and like she gets grumpy when she's compared to Carol, except for this time.
Yeah.
I think there is like. I think there's a real tragedy in this, especially in the fact that she rejects this family member, because they are people that have suffered from this family. They have a connection in that. This family has both done them wrong, and they are upset about it. And they could at least, like, sometimes your relationship with your family is irreparable, right? Like there's too much bad blood, there's too much pain, and so you're never just gonna have a relationship with family you want. But here's a member of your family, someone you're connected to, someone that knows those people, has been through the same things as those people, and is there, you know, sharing these things with you in a very relatable way. And he extends his hand, and he just like, nah, and it's really sad. It's really sad.
Yeah, just the fact that she really doesn't have to think about it. Yeah, yeah. Everybody was enjoying this quote from the chapter. Any walls, any defense mechanisms I need to watch out for? He asked. He sounded like he was teasing. I could 100% believe he was still holding on to his own, that it was a genuine belief and a genuine worry on his part. No, I said, I don't think I have any.
Oh, Victoria. The thing is, I don't think she's lying here. I think she genuinely believes that.
I think in her better moments, she is aware that this is ridiculous. This is not a better moment for her. And in this moment, she does believe this. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, what's funny is I literally didn't even notice the 100% until I read it out loud. And then I was like, okay.
100%.
Nothing like your mom.
I do just want to talk about, like, Victoria brings up Amy, and Mike is just like, okay. Like, is like, don't go to Amy for healing. Don't send your daughters to Amy for healing. Like, we talked about Eric back in the day, and I apologize for bringing him up.
Yeah. Why did you say that name?
But like, he's like, Eric doesn't know what Amy did. Mike doesn't know what Amy did. Eric is like, well, think about it from her perspective. And Mike is just like, okay, I trust you. Yeah. Like, if you say don't go around her, okay. You don't need to tell me any more details if you're not comfortable with it. I got you. I trust you. I take what you have to say. Good, done, boom. I don't know. I appreciate that, and like I like this guy a lot. I wish he had made choices that allowed him to be in her life more. I think things would have gone better for Victoria if he was in her life more often, not just when they were little. And I hope we see more of him, but I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, he seems like he was the only one who would have ever called the Dallins on their shit.
Yeah, yeah.
There's this fun idea that I think about sometimes. It's referred to as the evaporative cooling of groups, where like if you have a group of weird people, the people who can't take the weirdness are the ones who are going to leave the group, and thus the group on average will become weirder and weirder, and then as it gets weirder and weirder, the ones who can now no longer take the current level of weirdness will be the ones who leave, and it just becomes like the weirdest possible manifestation of itself, where only the most tolerant people remain. And this is what happened here. Is he was a guy who everybody would have benefited from him staying around and calling them on their shit.
Yeah.
And because he left, I mean, I'm not trying to be too hard on him, because I think part of it is you have to preserve your own mental health. And,
Sure,
and
sure.
when you're around toxic people, you shouldn't be. But it is just a true fact, I think, that Victoria would have benefited from having someone like him around.
Yeah, I agree.
So he then gives her a hug, which leads directly into horrifying. I don't know why that's like such. I just love that writing, even though it's just the same word 4 times. It's so like you totally feel it, you know.
It's powerful. Repetition is powerful.
Yeah.
Whenever you start repeating a word, the immediate reaction, I think, is, why is this word being repeated? It's important. It's emphasized.
Yeah.
It's powerful. I like it.
Right.
I mean, I hate it. I hate what's happening.
Yes.
But I really like it.
Because her hair is falling out, and her skin feels sunburned, and then she immediately becomes aware that she's surrounded by hurt, scared people, and she kind of mentally spirals out. And I think we can read between the lines and say that she's done that Victoria spaces out thing, except for all we know, she's like hyperventilating and like very visibly freaking out, and then she kind of comes to her senses when Jester has now showed up and is basically flanking her with Mike on the other side of her. It's really sad.
It is. And like we talked about earlier, the reason this scene works so well is because of the contrast with the previous one. Victoria was calm. We saw her smile. She's in this conversation with a family member that isn't going to end in like people saying things like "mom the fuck up" or stuff like that. Like it's such a change, and then this all happens and it all comes crashing down. And one of the things I love most especially about the writing is how it emphasizes the feel of her hair in her hand. There's this beautiful moment where I clenched my fist and I could feel strands of hair rubbing against strands of hair. That's such a small, like, you think about, like, you felt that before, right? If you have hair in your hand and you like move your hand around, they rub together, and you can actually feel that. But it's just a small little detail that shows her just like how aware she is of that. Like this is so powerful. And I mean, it is, the hair just starts the ball rolling, right? Like it's the thing that finally breaks her of everything else, where there's like, look at this, like, we're fucked. It's over. Like, here's all these injured people. Everyone's barely hanging on. My fucking hair's falling out. I'm hurt. And what was all that for? Perian and Foyle's relationship might be permanently ruined. Other people are barely hanging on. People are dead. What was it for? Nothing. It was for a draw. A draw in a long conflict that cannot end by definition, like the way it is right now. And oh my god. Oh my god.
Yeah. This is one of those moments where I'm just like, man, I want to know where she goes from here. Like, I mean, I always want to read the next chapter as soon as the chapter finishes. But this is one where I was just like, oh man, like I need it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Jester then kind of grounds her, right? He gives her what he basically goes down the checklist of what she described as being the protocol for how to deal with a person having a panic attack. But I think what's interesting, and other people have pointed this out, is that it looks similar to a Master Stranger protocol assessment.
Yeah, it is interesting because we get, in the previous chapter, we get the moment where she does this grounding thing for Switch Hitter. But then, in this moment, we do have this little beat of Master Stranger to kind of remind the audience that one of the ways to test for Master Stranger is to say, hey, tell me about a time that you remember the two of us. What was that like? And I mean, I don't like I do honestly like she's spiraling here, and it does serve to ground her. So like, sweet, that's awesome. Thank you, Jester. But yeah, I mean, I also have trouble being like, well, we just had this beat of Master Stranger, and it is very close to that. Was that to remind us? So in this moment, we're like, oh, she just got Master Strangered. I don't know.
I don't know either, and that's why this is one of the things that makes me want to read the next chapter, because like it could just be he's grounding her. He's a nice guy.
Yeah.
But it definitely reminds you of that thing that just happened.
Yeah, yeah.
Just before we kind of approach the end, her foot is probably broken, so she's probably been flying like everywhere, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there are times when it specifically mentions she's floating around.
Yeah.
I think there are times when it says like when she walks into the church or is being led by the doctor or the nurse, whatever. She says, "I took 2 steps and then I just fuck this. I floated."
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it doesn't always point it out, but I think every moment where we see her walking, she's probably not walking.
Yeah, right. So the chapter wraps up as the book essentially comes full circle back to chapter 1 with her meeting up with her old patrol block crew, Gilpatrick, Jester, and even Camisola, who is a character from the first chapter.
Indeed.
And there's this really interesting interaction at the end where Gilpatrick is like, "How are you managing?" And she responds, "How the hell are you guys managing?" Gil glanced at Jester, then at Camisola. "Guess that's answer enough," he said, which was fucking unfair of him when he didn't end up answering my question.
I love this moment. I love this moment. How you holding up, Victoria? Well, how the fuck are you holding up?
Yeah,
because
right.
I mean, what we didn't say, but she's looking at these people, and what she sees in them is people that are concerned, are tired, maybe a little bit worried, but completely different from the way the capes look. She sees the capes as people on the verge of collapse, like everything's fucked, everything's ruined, and then she looks at these people that don't even have powers, and they're just like, yeah, right,
same old shit, right?
I mean,
disasters.
I do think that's what it is. Like, how does she feel right now? Powerless. She feels like nothing she can do can fix anything,
which is how they've always felt.
Yeah. There are these big hulking super-powered monsters that they can't hope to defeat, right?
All they can do is just try to clean up the damage.
Yeah. This is for humans.
This is status quo, Victoria.
It's fucking Tuesday.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's absolutely what this moment is, but it's just so funny to me. It's just so funny to me how she handles this. Like, it ties into kind of her anti-human biases here, where they're just like, he just asks a question like, "How you doing? How you holding up?"
Right.
How are you managing? Right. And they're like, "Okay, well, that answers that question."
Yeah. Yeah.
I really like it. I think it's like, we see her spiral, and then Jester manages to like pull her back from the brink. I think, like, whether it was Master Stranger or not, he does center her, he does ground her, and he brings her slightly back. She's still not doing great, but he does bring her back. And there's this moment of, these are people that, like, at the very beginning of the book, she had a lot of respect for, and I still think she does, but just like that the way to phrase that statement is just so inherently insulting. Like, the capes aren't holding up well. How the fuck are you?
Yeah,
like,
right. It's a bit rude to say, "How the hell are?" I mean, because I don't necessarily read it as like a friendly, sarcastic, "How the hell are you guys managing?" I read it as a like, I'm a bit incensed that look at me and look at you, you know.
Yeah.
So as we look back over this chapter, I think you and I probably tried to map every possible person, symbol, or thought from this chapter onto something in chapter 1.
That's true.
Like, at one point, I was comparing Titan Scotty to the car that crashes into the monument.
Yeah, I think that was a stretch, Matt.
And this is just an example. That's just a sample of my thought process today. But I mean, clearly there are some connections. I don't think everything in this chapter is a perfect parallelism in a sort of Eclipse arc fashion where almost everything maps onto something. But there is a sense of coming full circle here, definitely, in some of these settings and images and people.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And the thing that I'm still not, I still don't have a firm grip on is the why, right? We talked about this at the very beginning of the show. I still don't even know if I'm there. I mean, besides just the general feeling of things are coming full circle, I haven't gotten a grip on why are we mirroring these beats? Why does this feel like an echo? And it's not the same echo because things are happening differently, right? Like the first time she met Shortcut, that interaction didn't go that terribly.
Right. In fact, it went really well. I went
Yeah.
back and looked at it, and he only turns on her when he much later finds out that she's a cape. So
Yeah, but this time, instantly bad. At the beginning, she opened her phone, read the text messages, and had a text conversation with her mother. Doesn't do that in this chapter. The whole Uncle Mike thing is almost like the inverse of the last of the barbecue. She talks to
Right.
the one person she really didn't acknowledge or see at all. It is the same but different.
yeah.
In interesting ways. And we haven't gotten to the community center yet. Presumably we will get there next chapter, but I think we need to pay attention to how those beats, maybe it'll become more apparent. Maybe this time next week will be like, oh, of course it was this. Look, here's this beat that kind of reveals it all. But
Yeah.
Until then we can only just say it seems like we're echoing a little bit here.
Yeah. And just for posterity, I think this will be enjoyable to, people listening, and then maybe it just kind of captures something of the feeling of keeping up with a web serial live, because when you think there's something going on but you're not sure what, you will go in some directions, my friend.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
so
yeah.
this is my short list of the possibilities that I considered and mostly rejected. Number 1, Victoria is dead and a ghost. Number 2, Victoria already went Titan and everyone is just pretending that she's fine. Number 3, Victoria's aura is doing something. Number 4, Waste has joined the network with Fume Hood, and she's now in communication with her. Victoria is in a parallel dimension, and that's why things feel a little bit weird. Mike is not actually there. This is a hallucination. This whole chapter is actually Waste's point of view. This isn't precisely Waste's point of view, but a lot of Victoria's thoughts are Waste's. I actually think that's just true. The Titans aren't even actually there. It's all just Chardonnay's hallucinations.
You didn't share that one with me.
That's my favorite. And then this one wasn't mine. This one came from Feridian and via Ovid in a thread somewhere. The radiation actually comes from her phone, and they're trying to assassinate the capes. Or the radiation comes from the iCam, and Kinsey made a terrible mistake.
Okay, that's
There
a
you go.
lot. That's a
Those
lot.
are all the things that I considered. I'm not gonna say I believe all of them at the same time, because that would be wrong.
Yeah.
But I'm just kind of giving a sample of like what keeping up with a story will kind of put you through sometimes.
Yeah, it's a unique experience, right? Like we said last week, we'll know the answers. We'll know all of what you just said is wrong. Maybe next week, maybe 2 weeks from now, right?
Thanks. Yeah.
But right now we're in this beautiful middle area where we just don't know, and it's exciting to be there. I want to talk to you. We didn't really talk about the hair falling out and the burn, the sunburns,
No, we didn't.
because obviously the arc is called radiation, so the brain immediately says, oh, that sounds like radiation sickness. That sounds like what happens with radiation sickness. And if we say that, yes, that's what this is, then we have to further ask the question, well, where'd that come from? If it's not the phone or the iCam, where did it come from? And there's so many little beats and clues around here. Like the, I believe the effect when Oberon like makes things float so he can use them is like this greenish yellow effect on them, and I'm like, what about that? The Victoria is basically covered in fume hood smoke while she's hanging out on her shoulder.
Right.
There's all different things that could end up being a link to this. I think the most promising one for me is that dip into the shard world, right? Like if we look at, is this happening to other people? We don't know enough yet, but is there something that's uniquely happening to Victoria, or is it happening to other people? If it is unique to Victoria, what has Victoria done that no one else has done that we know of? And that's going for a dip in Shardland.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we're talking about a hole between dimensions. Like that's got to have some weird shit going on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the theories I didn't even write down was that the radiation came from fume hood, and that it was really a tragic and terrible choice to go sit on her shoulder for a few minutes.
Yeah.
I hope that's not the case.
I mean, and then, I mean, there's the really juicy ideas where you can just say, this is what happens when you connect with your shard to the level that Victoria is. It doesn't even have to be related to the shard world itself. It's just a long-term effect of the connection that they have. And that is juicy to me because she loves this connection, right? We've established in this chapter that she looks at a member of her family who's reaching out, who's holding out her hand, and she says, no. But she says, yes, many hands of shard, I need you. I need you. And I'm not willing to do anything that risks that. And then if we say, okay, well, to keep having this, to retain this control, to retain this connection, your body is going to change. It's going to collapse. It's like, do you still want that? That has interesting implications to me. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that you've joined me over here at the chocolate counter. and there's a lot of different flavors that I think you should sample with me.
I like the dark chocolate. What does that mean?
I accept all chocolate lovers in my buffet here.
Okay, great.
That's it.
That's it. We did it.
I think that's it. I definitely enjoyed the going off on wild ass tangents. We don't usually do that, but sometimes you just have to.
You do, and I think it's fun. I hope everyone enjoyed it. I think it's fun. I think it'll be fun a year from now to go back and listen to these things and just be like, a ghost, Matt.
Right.
A ghost. Or a ghost? How did he do that?
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. Mike's not actually there. Wow. Yeah. So, okay. Discussion question from last week was, give an example of how Wildbow communicates escalating stakes through writing choices. Vice Versa said, remember reading the Leviathan arc for the first time and just watching the deaths rack up? Remember Taylor trying and failing to save Chubster's life? Remember Armsmaster talking mad game before suddenly second triggering into Arm Master? That's a good example of communicating escalating stakes. I agree. A lot of people actually mention Leviathan fight in different ways, and we'll get to those. But really good example. Love it.
Yeah. We have Steven who says, the main way I think Wildbow escalates tension is by conveying the gradual understanding that sinks in that the world won't go back to the way it was, even if the good guys come out on top. The cities that the Endbringers attacks would never be the same after. The multiverse Earth will never fully recover from Scion. The Titans, well, something game-changing will have to happen to restore the world to any sense of safety or normalcy. Yeah, but that's true. It's like part of stakes are consequences. And establishing that win or lose, there will be a change is really good way to establish those stakes.
One way in which this defies normal superhero conventions is that if it kind of does tend to feel that in superhero stories, everything always gets rolled back.
Yeah.
And shit never gets rolled back in Parahumans.
Nope.
X Das Nouveau says the cafeteria scene. We have the scene itself from people observation over high school drama and an escape plan situation to a hostage scenario, and finally a small revolution. And then the scene as a theme. The White Hats do not care about the rules anymore. The White Hats risk a school of children. The people side with the actual helping party. Heroes are useless. Skitter lost his retreat, etc. The scene was just wow, and I remember that the aftermath was a bit underwhelming for me back then. I mean, the escalation came just a bit later than I thought it would be. Yeah, I like that because, I mean, Taylor. The whole thing about Taylor is she gets into every or rather, her way of getting out of a bad situation is to make everything infinitely more complicated and dangerous. So obviously that's why she's called the Queen of Escalation. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's a perfect example of her doing that. So
yeah, I like that a whole bunch. I just love that scene.
Yeah.
Plastic Swordfish says, it might not be conventional escalation, but I'm going to go with Taylor's sanity slipping during the final arc of Worm. It kept up the feeling of raising stakes even though we were already seeing the biggest possible fight by adding a race against time and the chance of a personal tragedy for Taylor and her friends. The gradualness of it really helped sell it, so that by the end I really believe Taylor could be unsavable or accidentally kill the remaining people she cared about. I don't think that would have worked if she'd instantly gone berserk the second Amy touched her, or if it had been a standard superheroes fight over a misunderstanding thing. Yeah, that's a good point.
Right.
That actually makes me think of what it was probably like to read that arc were we slowly watching Taylor's transformation as chapters are coming out week to week. I think if we were recording that show, we would have an episode like this where we're like, what's going on with Taylor?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely remember reading it the first time and the bits where like teachers using words that don't make any sense. And I'm just like, did Wildbow forget how to speak English? And then you realize that no, Taylor forgot how to speak English.
Yeah, that's the logical conclusion.
Yeah.
The
right.
writer forgot the language they're writing in.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not proud. So Anti-Chris says 18.6 is his example. It shows Perion first crossing a line by using the fallen heroes' costumes before crossing the final line and using their skin. So many authors would have skipped that first one, simply having Perion do the skin monster. But no, Wildbow establishes that leather is Perion's best material, then draws our attention to the idea of scavenging the dead capes as a resource while establishing that Perion is willing to do that. While establishing that Perion is willing to do what many there will consider to be a violation of fallen heroes, all before her big skin monster play. Yeah, I mean that's slightly different than I tend to think of escalation, but it is a kind of building up to something. So yeah,
I mean it is. I like that because you could just raise the stakes, or you could raise the stakes,
right?
and we talked about the reason this works so much is exactly for the reasons that Anti-Chris is saying here. That like it's we see the steps to. We see each step she takes to walk up to that line before she crosses it, and it makes it feel like it makes it the action rises, and we approach this moment, and by the time we're there, we know that she's going to do it, and it's going to be horrible.
Right, and I would say like if you had to point out what are the stakes are. The stakes are basically Perion's fear that everyone is going to judge her and think differently of her after this.
Yeah,
and that is actually what happens, right? So, it's very, very personal and human stakes in contrast to the epic, science fiction thing that's happening in the foreground. So I love that.
Yeah. David Hunt focuses on the accumulation of Victoria's physical injuries. Many fights have added to the cumulative damage, and the damage sticks around. Her catalog of injuries communicate the stakes of the game that Victoria has dealt herself into. We also get hints and then outright statements about what a terrible patient she is.
Yeah, that's funny.
100%. Yeah, I like that. I mean, and those injuries stick around. She still complains about getting shot.
Right. Yeah, I feel like all of her extremities have been injured at this point.
Yep, pretty much. That poor foot. That was her good foot.
Yeah, that was the last thing she had was a foot. Yeah. MTVC Grid says Wildbow does a lot to show things escalating on ever greater scales and scopes. The relative importance of the main character's personal struggles gradually shrinks relative to the global and multiversal consequences, but simultaneously, the main characters begin to define the shape of the world to come. I think this is true in both stories, yes, this started out as a very kind of close neighborhood level battle superhero story. So did Worm. And now we're on these, ridiculous stakes, but the main characters remain central to things. And it works really well. It's a good formula, I think.
I think that's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do to elevate your thing to this global scale while still finding a reason for why your protagonist is at the center of it. Especially if you want to, by design, start small and then escalate up to it. Because like you constantly have to, at every point along the way, you have to find a way to justify why Taylor? Why do people care? Like why is she here in this moment? Why is Victoria here? Why does this matter? And you have to find an in-story reason for why that is. And I think both of these stories do that very successfully for different reasons. I mean, I think Taylor's is because that's just her personality. She's going to put herself there. She's going to be if she hears the world is ending in 2 years, she's going to be there. Even if she wasn't told that she was there, she's going to be there. Victoria is kind of, just by the nature of, answer seeking, she's going to push herself into those moments. If there's big unanswerable questions about the nature of powers, the nature of shards, the nature of this entire existence, Victoria's going to be at the center of that because she cares about that more than just about anyone.
Yeah, no, I very true. Yeah, the reason why the character is still central at the end of the story is actually core to how that character is constructed, and so it feels very consistent.
Yep, and core to what the story is trying to say with that character.
Yes.
Where are we?
Sarah
Penguin talks about Weaver dice, specifically the version in Worm. Taylor gives a sense of the heavy risks involved by giving deadly outcomes relatively high likelihoods. That's true. To children, though, Taylor, they're just children,
right? But it conveys the seriousness of the world very concretely. That she's like, yeah, look, like villains very likely to die. Every cape very likely to die. This is true, and we've seen this in the story. And you're like, oh shit, that's true. You feel it in the moment. Mm-hmm. SNES C talks about the Leviathan fight and being surprised that Empire 88 showed up. It really sold what a huge threat the Endbringers were, to the point where some of the most wanted villains in the city were showing up to do their part. Yeah, absolutely right.
That's a fantastic point. I don't remember what we said about this, but like this is a Nazi.
Yeah, I think you basically expressed like genuine surprise, like, wow, like these guys are here, like that. I didn't think they would show up, and it's like, yeah, well, that shows you how serious this threat is considered, and there's not going to be a city left if they don't fight him off, so they have to. Yeah. Yep. All right, good answers. We love it. I understand that was maybe a harder question than usual, so I really appreciate everyone's answers.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time, everyone.
So question for this next week. Tell us about a time Wildbow used an unusual technique to let us know how a character was doing emotionally.
Ooh, I like this question a whole bunch. I think this is another challenging one, but I am very excited to see y'all's answers.
Yeah, I usually feel good about a question when I think of it and then I can think of a few examples relatively easily. And I'm like, okay,
Sure.
then people will surely think of more than I was able to think of.
So, oh, absolutely. They always do.
Yeah. And that's all we've got for you this week on We've Got Ward. You guys are all part of this show, so feel free to provide us with advice, questions, or thoughts on this week's reading.
You can reach us via email at gotwormpod@gmail.com or over on our Twitter account at gotwormpod. My personal Twitter is at scottdaily85, and Matt's is at moradinamail. I have to do it right every once in a while so people can actually find you on Twitter.
I appreciate that. Moradinamail ghost. If you're not already subscribed to We've Got Ward, we strongly recommend you do so and never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else you can find podcasts.
And as always, you can find this and all the other shows we do over at our website, doofmedia.com. That's where you will find Do the Right Thing, host of the Doof the Right Thing contest we talked about at the beginning of the show. We've heard us talk about the show before. It's great. If you're a writer, which you might be if you listen to the show, or if you read this book and you want to flex your writing skills and maybe win some prizes, listen to Do the Right Thing, participate in Doof the Right Thing.
One thing maybe I could have mentioned earlier was that it's a 2,000 word upper limit, which is really not a very long story. So
yeah, that's like 1/8,000th of one chapter in a Wildbow story.
Yeah, you really have no excuse not to submit an entry, is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
talking to you. To Jeff.
Yeah. Why do we always end our show personally attacking the people that listen to us?
It's a thing now. Yes. So if you like any of these Doof shows and you want to support them, consider donating to our Patreon account on patreon.com/doofmedia. This is what funds these awesome contests that we're able to do, that we're so excited to do. You can donate $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. Supporting us on Patreon gives you tons of great bonuses, like the ability to vote in fan art contest and this upcoming writing contest, hangout sessions with the Doof crew, access to live streams of our recording sessions, and our excellent Discord channel. And as always, of course, donate to Wildbow at patreon.com/Wildbow. This is his world. We are just playing in it. Special thanks this week to new patrons, Bidoofs, Stephen M., and the Alpha Spam. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Really, really appreciate that. And, of course, if you cannot afford to donate right now, that is absolutely okay. There are tons of ways to help us out. heading on over to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or anywhere else that has reviews and leaving one of those reviews. Hit that 5-star button, write some nice words about us or some mean words. That's fine. We have a new review. We haven't had a new review in a while, Matt.
Oh my God.
We have a new review from MC Minty Spice from Canada.
Okay.
Who says, 2 brilliant hosts, wow, thank you, show the beauty of the best superhero story. Wildbow's Parahumans is dissected by 2 witty and analytical friends. Join Scott making insane predictions and freaking out about morality. He has that in quotes. And Matt expertly playing a poker face. They delve into the smartest deconstruction of the superhero genre with insight and infinitely creative world building, deeply empathetic character writing, and a lot of thought put into the question, why is the power to control bugs terrifying? Jokes aside, Matt and Scott have helped me truly elevate my appreciation for what already is my favorite web serial. They do excellent close readings and explain exactly what's doing right. I can't read today in an amazing series. I wholeheartedly recommend it to anyone who reads Parahumans, especially because you can listen to it as you read along. Well, MC Minty Spice, I love your name, and thank you for that review. We really, really appreciate it.
Well, how do people write such good reviews?
I don't know. It is my everlasting shame that as much as I ask people to review my podcasts, I don't do the same. I do review. I'll leave them 5 stars, but I'm always like, what do I say? It's good. It's good.
I think I've reviewed like 1 podcast. I really need to stop being a hypocrite and get on that.
Because I need to just. The problem is the iTunes interface for reviewing is just so awful.
That's the problem. That's
terrible.
That's the only reason. But yeah, we really, really, really love it. That we really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
That's all we've got for you this week. Next week we find out what the fuck's going on with Victoria.
Will we though? Will we?